Being the appointed hour, I hereby call this rescheduled regular meeting to order. Matt, if you will, please call the roll.
Certainly. Dr. Ruth Cox is excused. Tripp Ure.
Here.
Jim Bisbee.
Here.
George Brake is excused. Peggy Broadway.
Here.
Christian Evans.
Here.
Joseph Klotz.
Here.
Ellen Sheridan.
Here.
And James O. Woods.
Here.
All right, so
We
we've
have
got a
a
quorum.
quorum.
Yep, sorry about that.
No problem.
We have no minutes tonight. We'll review those at our next meeting. The Historic Preservation Commission.
Go ahead. Sorry.
You okay?
Yes.
Okay. The Historic Preservation Commission is a public commission appointed by the City of New Bern's Board of Aldermen. It is responsible for preserving and safeguarding New Bern's locally designated historic districts, downtown and Riverside, based on U.S. Department of Interior standards, state statutes, city ordinance, and New Bern's historic guidelines. Two of the major tasks of the HPC include approving applications for a certificate of appropriateness and preventing demolition of historic structures due to neglect. The Historic Preservation Commission holds a quasi-judicial hearing on an application for a certificate of appropriateness. The Commission hears sworn testimony and evidence provided by the applicant, by parties who receive notice of the hearing, and by others who can justify that they have relevant evidence and are directly affected by the application. The Commission cannot consider comments based on personal likes or dislikes, hearsay, or personal opinion that cannot be directly related to specific historic guidelines. Likewise, commissioners will refrain from stating personal opinion, personal likes or dislikes, or hearsay during a hearing. The Commission's decision on an application is based solely on the testimony and evidence presented at the hearing that directly relates to the historic district guidelines. With that said, we need to swear in anyone who will be presenting testimony tonight. And Matt, if you will help us with that.
If you would come forward, please. If you're going to have any comment this evening, you'll need to come forward. Figured there'd be more than one person. Although you could handle a lot of them. And then tonight I'd like you to at least sign your names when we're done so that we actually know who you are. Because we can't always tell from the video who you are. All right? So if you want to raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth to the best of your knowledge? Okay. Please sign your name.
All right, now that we're all sworn in, generally this is how we're going to proceed with the hearing of the COA applications. The administrator, Matt, is going to provide an overview of the application. The applicant will have a chance to present the application. Then we'll ask for proponents and opponents of the application to speak. And then we'll turn things over to the board where they will ask questions likely of the applicant and carry on with discussion to move towards a decision to issue a COA. I've rolled in 3 or 4 steps altogether in that last description, but ultimately, we'll call for a motion to either approve or deny the application with stated findings of fact. And then we'll vote accordingly. All right. So, at this point, I believe we're starting with old business tonight, 215 Pollock Street. Matt, you want to?
That's correct. 215 Pollock Street is continued from the previous meeting to include a request to replace roofing damaged by time and Hurricane Florence. This is an after-the-fact COA. And we have on the screen, we have the application, which is only scrolling very slowly. Sorry, page down should go. Oh, there we go. So with this one, we see their complete application includes photographs of the roof, which we can go back over as necessary. The roof edge. And then we also have various, the rest of their application includes some aerials, roof plan, their estimate of the area. There was a stop work order that was done because there was no approval for this roof. And the pending building inspection, building permit, which was not garnered either. The review by the zoning and the building inspections personnel at the office regarding the project basically says that the zoning this project meets the requirements of the land use ordinance. And then here that the chief building inspector said that it will require a building permit. So we've also then included after that the actual guidelines out of the guidelines booklet. Got some patios, something like that, but I don't know why that's in there, must be a mistake. And then some photographs of the current, the building with its current roofing, the new roofing that was installed without the permit. And then also included photos of adjacent properties with the more historic roofing on the left and the subject roof on the right. It'll blow up. Also another neighboring one, so various other neighboring roofs. And then finally our recommendation. So the applicant can come and make their presentation. Is there anyone? Well,
Yeah.
it's your.
So do we have an applicant here tonight? Or a representative of the applicant? All right, duly noted. At this point, I'd like to ask if there is anyone who would like to speak in favor of the application.
Mr. Chairman, I need to recuse myself. This is a neighbor.
Sorry. So we've got one recusal, and I think it
Requires a motion.
it sure does require a motion.
So moved.
Second.
We got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? Well, please come back to join us soon. And we have a long agenda tonight, so if there are any other conflicts, feel free to interrupt me and let me know so we can take care of that. So as Dr. Joe is heading to the gallery, again, at this point, I'd like to hear from anyone who would like to speak in favor of the application. All right. What? Have you been sworn in? Well, you'll need to be sworn in, and you'll need to come to the microphone and give your name to Matt for the record.
Hi, how are you? Good.
So please raise your right hand.
Okay.
Do you swear to tell the truth as to the best of your knowledge?
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks.
So while we're taking care of this matter of business again, if anybody who wants to participate and speak tonight, you need to ultimately be sworn in, and now's a good time to take care of it. Get signed. You can always decide not to speak. No penalties. All right.
This won't take long.
Yeah.
I'm just in favor of it. I live across the street in the Jarvis at 220.
Do you want to
And-
at least tell us your name while you're there?
Oh, sorry. I'm Denise Gleason. And it's a huge improvement, the roof. I don't see a problem with it. I honestly don't. That's all I'm going to say is that I'm for it. It's a huge improvement.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Denise.
Thank you.
Anyone else who would like to speak in favor of the application? Is there anyone who would like to speak against the application?
I would just like to know what
Ne-
Mike said.
Well, I need you to come to the podium. And again, we got you sworn in, right? Okay. But if you would, please give your name. That'll help Matt out.
Catherine Askew, and I'm new. I have purchased a home, my first one in the
Right.
historical district, so this is
I
all new.
recognize you now.
Okay, you do. And so I'm just inquiring what is not approved on that, because I don't know.
Yeah. And so, Ms. Catherine, I think we'll be able to help you with that here shortly. But the long and short answer is there's a pretty vigorous debate between the property owner and at least some members of this board of whether it complies with a certain substantial guideline that is applicable.
Oh, okay.
All right. Anybody else who'd like to speak in favor of the application? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to close the period for public comment on this application. And I think since we have no applicant, that brings us to board discussion. Where would we like to start?
Explain to Catherine about the standing seam on the roof.
Matt, can you go to the picture that shows 215, the roof that they have on there now?
Certainly.
Or 454.
Well, no, just the picture of the roof, so we can, right there, that one. So according to this picture right here, in our guidelines, it's supposed to be a flat, single seam. And if you look at this picture, it looks almost like it's cardboard, like it's corrugated. So that's unacceptable according to the guidelines. See how the roof looks like it's corrugated? Which it is corrugated. I mean, we can look at it and tell.
So let me help us get started. Guideline 4.5.4 states that standing seam metal roofs shall have a pan width no greater than 24 inches. Pan shall be completely flat without corrugation. Provide double lock seams with flush, ridge, and hip flashings on contributing structures. Okay. And so would one of my colleagues like to dissect this for us real quickly so we can move on? There are a couple things that I see that are wrong. Does anybody else want to chime in other than the flat pan that James has noticed?
Does the flush ridge speak to the ridge cap?
It does.
Yes. And that has a ridge cap on it in the picture. It's included by the
On
guideline.
top of the seam. And then there's one more thing that I think we need to point out for the record that is not congruous with that guideline. And that's the fact that the seam between panels is not a rolled seam. Okay, so we talked a good bit about this during design review. And so I'm happy to revisit that conversation if the board members wish, or public comments closed, or we'll have a motion to move forward.
I move that we move forward.
Just a question.
Yes.
Was the owner just not aware of the guidelines?
I don't want to speculate.
Okay.
Well, Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
I move that we find the application for 215 Pollock Street. 215 Pollock Street. Where was I? That we do not issue a certificate of appropriateness for 215 Pollock Street to be in congruence with New Bern's Code of Ordinance, section 15-411 to 15-429, and New Bern's Historical District Guidelines based on the following specific guidelines and findings of facts. The project is after the fact. The newly installed roof is not completely flat without corrugation. The newly roof does not have flush ridge and hip flashing. The proposed project is incongruous with the guidelines, specifically 4.5.4, which states pans shall be completely flat without corrugation, and flush ridge and hip flashings are to be approved.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Any discussion?
This stinks. It
All right.
just does.
Just to be clear on, this is a motion that is stating that the roof as installed is not congruous with historic district guidelines. Make sure everybody's clear. Okay. All those in favor of the application as stated, please say aye.
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 The motion, you mean, in favor of the motion.
The motion as stated. Any opposed? Okay. All right, and so I don't think, Matt, we would have a motion for a certificate of appropriateness because in effect we've denied the application.
That's correct.
All right. So that takes us to new business. Oh, yeah. Where'd Dr. Joe go? Come on back. New business, first item on my agenda is 510 Pollock Street.
I move that we let Dr. Joe rejoin the board.
Second.
Have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thanks, sir.
Nope.
Matt, I'm ready when you are.
Sure, all right. Our next application is 510 C Pollock Street to include installation of a fence salvaged from a historic property in a non-primary AVC area of visual concern. The application is here as shown, and I'll skip ahead to some of the photographs. It concerns this small building here, which is located in the middle of the block behind the Airy Bed and Breakfast, correct? And also behind, on the other side of the block, behind the Historic Society building. And we'll be talking here about the fence will be extending from the two newel posts at the bottom to the right and the left. And then this is the immediately adjacent building, the subject properties on the right, and just as context, immediate building to the left. And then this is a close-up of an area of discussion that they'll talk about with regard to the design. And then this is essentially the right-hand side of that subject building where the fence will terminate just at the left of the screen, I believe. And then now going back again to the left-hand side of the subject building and the neighboring building, you can see the back of the Historic Society building as well. All right, and then we have our recommendations after that.
My name is Rodney Hayes. I'm representing the New Bern Garden Club, which is the owner of the Judge William Gaston office, which is the little building that you saw. It's now in its third location. We took ownership in 1948. It was moved originally from Judge Gaston's property in the front to the back. Then it was moved to a lot that the city owned, and then the city was going to turn it into bathrooms, which we thought was maybe not a great idea for it, since it is a historical house. So it was given to us, to the garden club, and we moved it, thankfully, with the approval and the blessing of the New Bern Historical Society, to their property. What we want to do, as explained, is put 2 pieces of fencing, which are actually from the Atmore Oliver house, which exists now on the Atmore Oliver house. These are extra pieces of fencing that have been reserved and taken care of over the years. And we just want to put those to either, as Matt explained, to either side of the pillars, to the end of the house, and put historic gardens behind it, between the house, or the office actually, and the fence.
Did you bring some photographs of the?
I did. Is that,
Yes. That would
do
be
you
good.
have anything in that? Okay. I think you all kind of get the idea of where it is, right?
Mhm.
Yes, ma'am.
There you go.
This is the original Judge Gaston's office, which there's some debate as to actually when it was built, but the consensus is sometime around 1824. At that point, in 1949 or earlier, it was moved to, as I said, to the back of his property from where his house was. In September of 2016, we moved it again. These are pictures where it's up on the...
Under cover of darkness.
And that's where it
Like
is
the bottom of a
resting
coat.
today. That you can see on that lower picture. The fencing will go from either side of the pillars of the stairway to the end of the house. There is that lovely page-link fence on the right-hand side, which we intend to cover with vines. But the fencing, as I say, it's historic. There are pieces of it at the Atmore Oliver house, so it's
Do you have pictures of the fencing?
you know, I don't.
Yep.
Isn't that silly? But if you go by Atmore Oliver house on Broad, it's the fencing along the left. Theirs is set in brick piers. Ours is just going to be in the ground. But it's I know there was a question on how wide, I think the, and Susan had that, and I want to say it was 3.5 inches between post to post. I believe it's 3.5 inches.
Okay.
I don't know.
Let's see. Are you completed with your comments at this time?
I'm sorry?
Are you finished with your comments at this
Yep.
time?
Unless you have any questions.
Well, before we get to that, first, do we have any public comment either for or against this application? Okay, so I'm going to close the public comment period for this application. And Matt, could you give us the recommendation, please?
Certainly. So, for 510 C Pollock Street, to include installation of a fence salvaged from historic property and a non-primary AVC, submit the following as appropriate to this application for the, I'm sorry. Ding. There we go. The sections in the guidelines that are appropriate are fences and garden walls, sections 2.5.1, 2.5.2, and statements of reason based on the information contained in the application and staff's judgment are: the proposed project is within the non-primary area of visual concern. Interesting phraseology there, non-primary. The fence is a historic fence similar to the fence at another location on the overall property, and the proposed project is not incongruous with guidelines.
Okay, Thank you.
Therefore, we recommend the commission approve the application for major exterior alterations at this time, citing the aforementioned guidelines.
Thank you. All right, commissioners, do we have any questions of the applicant before she escapes?
I heard approved, I'm good.
Well, you're not there yet. Come on back.
No, that was only our recommendation.
Any questions for the applicant? Okay, so I'm going to get us started off and maybe over the hurdle of the lack of the photo. I'm satisfied that because of the nature of the compound of historic buildings on the Historical Society site and familiarity with the fence in front of the Atmore Oliver House, and if it being one of the same variety, that I can kind of get along with things without that photo for the time being. But I would suggest our motion maker make it a condition that that photo be submitted to Matt just for record keeping it, to confirm exactly what type of fence fenestration was to be put in place within the context of the application. Are there any members who take exception to proceeding at this point? No, we okay? All right. So,
Mr. Chair, I move that we find the application for a certificate of appropriateness for 510 C Pollock Street to be in non-congruence with New Bern Code of Ordinance sections 15-411 to 15-429 and New Bern's Historical District guidelines based on the following specific guidelines and findings of fact. Guidelines: fences and garden walls 2.5.1 to 2.5.2. Findings of fact. The fence is a historical fence similar to the fence at another location on the overall property. The proposed project is not in congruence with the guidelines. I recommend that we approve the application with the following conditions: that a photo of the fence is provided for record keeping to Matt.
okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion at this point?
Who was the second?
I heard both
Jim.
ends of the bench. Okay. Hearing no board discussion at this point, all those in favor of the application, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Can we have a motion to issue a certificate of appropriateness?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, now,
Now.
you're good to go.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time, and please get that information to Matt as soon as you can.
Thank you. So who made the motion on the COA?
I did.
Thank you.
Okay. Ready?
All right. Next item.
Next item, 209 Change Street.
209 Change Street is to include changing the approval of a relocated door and frame to a new door and frame in the Tertiary AVC. This is an amendment to an existing certificate of appropriateness. And let's see, so page down. The application, the main thing is this was the previously approved door. This is the proposed new door. You can see this one has the 8 lights of glass and the transom. The previously approved door happened to be one that was salvaged from the house, but that door, historic door, was lost at subsequent during the renovation process for the rest of the project, and so now they're proposing this door here. All right, I'll let the applicant continue from
The door is Hella door unit. It's a true solid core wood door. It's a 2/4 light pattern. It's a true divided light. The door itself is 6'8" by 3 feet. The transom is a true divided light. It's 3 feet by 14 inches. Altogether, it's 7'11". And it matches up very well with the head of the adjacent window. And the reason I'm here again is the unit, somewhere during the flood, before I got involved, it was either thrown out or I speculate that it was eaten up with termites and it just got tossed out. But any questions?
First of all, can you state your name?
Oh, Gary Peterson.
Thank you.
Yeah, we know that guy.
I know.
Yes, we do.
We know that guy. Okay, so we've heard from the applicant. Is there anybody from the public who would like to speak either for or against the application? Okay, hearing none. Staff recommendations, please.
Certainly. So we submit the following historic district guidelines as appropriate to this application. Windows, doors, and openings, section 4.3.1, 4.3.2, and 4.3.3, and the statements of reason based on the information contained in the application and staff's judgment are: the proposed project is within the tertiary area of visual concern. The door includes true divided lights between panes, and the proposed project is not incongruous with the guidelines. Staff recommends the Commission approve this amendment to the previous COA approval for major exterior alterations at this time, citing the aforementioned guidelines.
Okay, thank you. So like all the other applications we've heard tonight, we reviewed this at design review as well. So do we need any further discussion at this point? Do we have someone who would care to hazard a motion?
I will move. I move that we find the application for a certificate of appropriateness for 209 Change Street to be not incongruous with New Bern's Historic District ordinances, sections 15.411 through 15.429, New Bern's Historic District guidelines, based on the following specific guidelines and findings of fact. The applicable guidelines are for windows, doors, and openings, 4.3.1, 4.3.2, 4.3.3. Findings of fact, the opening is in the Tertiary AVC. The door has true divided lights and is a solid wood door, and it's not incongruous with the Historic District guidelines.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion.
Second.
We have a second, heavy from this side. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And this was a amendment to a previous application, so the certificate of appropriateness has already been issued. So thank you, G.
Thank you much.
Good to see you. All right, next item on the agenda, I believe, is 203 South Front Street, which is the convention center, and this happens to be the portion dealing with the rear patio.
Correct. So to include, there are two items for the convention center this evening. This first one is to include remodeling the rear portion of the building, the rear patio, and rear lawn area of the convention center. So, oh boy, okay. All right, we're going to have to change the Zoom on these. All right, so this should probably do it. This is the existing, well, more or less existing, or at least it was prior to recent flooding. Let's go back to,
We call that events beyond our control.
right. So, and this is a plan of the changes, or the plan of the project area. At the bottom of the big black spot is the landscaping and the patio work that's proposed to be done. This is an enlargement of that, and it also shows, you can see at the top of the screen, a somewhat grayer area inside the building, and then a whiter area just below that, that's still apparently inside the building. That is the area that they're expanding to enclose that otherwise or currently open covered area. They're now kind of like enclosing your front porch, or back porch. They're enclosing it here, and the existing outline of the interior of the building is in gray. But you also see some more site landscaping details. This oval shaped one at the bottom with the diagonal lines through it is actually at ground level, and is a paving pattern there. And on the left, adjacent to the photographs on the left, there is a series of white squares akin to airline seating patterns. That represents, I guess, potential use of that space over there as a wedding venue. And you'll also notice, though, that in between those two areas, the white area has a curving edge to it, which currently is not curved, but is straight line angles. So, and they provide a lot of photographs of similar kinds of designs elsewhere. And they're also proposing these kinds of sail-like covers over the patio, some exterior lighting at night, some of the landscaping details. And then again, here's that landscape plan. This is a rendering. It's a little bit cut off on the right at the moment, but you get the idea here. Now there's the wedding venue on the left, the patio in the middle with those sails, and on the right is that at-grade patio area. Some more renderings of the project. You can see here on the upper left how the porch has now been enclosed. Sorry to put it that way, guys. Easy to explain though. And on the bottom left, the columns, which have the yellow brick or yellow color on them, are the currently original or current exterior columns in the exterior wall. And so the patio expansion, the porch expansion, actually expands the entire space much more than a porch enclosure would. Upper right and bottom right, some more views of the patio. There's a more better overall view of that. And you can see they're using the bottom patio as well. With some landscaping, we'll probably talk about that as well. This is some of the existing conditions there. You may have been by there to see this, where the Florence just destroyed some of these brick walls. With that wave action, here the entire wall just flopped down. Boom. And then our recommendations. So.
All right, and we've got an applicant representative tonight.
Yes, David Griffin with Oakley Collier Architects, represent the owners tonight. Matt did an excellent job of covering all that. So.
Yeah, he's pretty
It's
good at
just,
it.
in the big picture, convention center, we're trying to expand the event space out into the existing area to make it a little more inviting, but two, trying to bring some of the waterfront back into the convention center. So we're really opening up more glass. The patio is definitely a function they've been needing. It's obviously not been out back now. The materials on the building are all products already on the building for the most part. We're just shifting them to different locations. Else on the patio, the railing system, we're proposing to stay with your stainless steel cable wire. Stays a little with the nautical theme, but a little more transparent than anything else we've looked at back there. So we're trying to keep a very fresh look for the convention center on the back side. So this is all fairly new and very organic, and let's say in layout. That's where the curved nature of what we're doing now versus the somewhat uninviting and hard walls from the previous design. Landscaping, considerably more now than is out there now. All the existing larger trees will stay intact and protected. So we're working diligently to make a very much a better environment back there for use for the convention center and just in general public use as well back there. Also to Matt's point, as far as the building goes, all of the new interior space is under the existing roof, so not really growing the roof structure or footprint of the building. We're just enclosing an area that's already been there from previous years. The sails are a plus. They're going to provide us some shade during the hotter weather. They're rather unique. They automatically close in high winds, so it's a substantial investment for the convention center, but we think, once again, it makes the back patio area way more functional as far as a year-round function out there. Any other questions? We didn't cover on all that.
So that winds you up. Before we get to questions, I do want to ask for public comment, either for or against the application. All right, well,
There you go.
to get in the record, we need your name and need you sworn in, because I think you came in late.
Yes, if you want it to be on the record, you'll have to be sworn in and say it at the microphone.
It's not such a terrible
Have you been
thing.
sworn in? No, okay. All right.
I swear I love it.
Do you swear to tell the truth to the best of your ability?
Yes. I love it, and I'm glad you guys are doing this. We really need that.
All right, thank you for enduring our rigorous procedures here.
Good.
I'm Leanne Kingsbury. I live at 315 Bern Street. I also love it. I think it's beautiful. I have one question, and that is, what happens to our lily sculpture?
That stays exactly as it is today.
Oh, great.
Okay.
That's kind of a mandate when we started.
Imagine it wasn't going to be far.
All right. Any other public comment before we close that opportunity? Okay, hearing none, public comment is closed. And Matt, could you give us staff recommendation, please?
Certainly. Okay. This is for 203 South Front Street to include remodeling the rear portion of the building, the rear patio, and rear lawn area of the convention center. We submit the following historic district guidelines as appropriate to this application. Waterfront modifications, section 2.9.3, 2.9.4, design principles 3.1.5, modifications 3.2.1, 3.2.2, and additions 3.3.3. The statements of reason based on the information contained in the application and staff's judgment are: the proposed project is within the primary area of visual concern. The promenade is not diminished by the design, and the design includes lighting that is not overly ornate. The design does not attempt to create a false sense of historical development, and the materials and design are compatible with the materials and design of the existing building. And fourthly, the proposed project is not incongruous with the guidelines. So staff recommends the commission approve the application for major exterior alterations at this time, citing the aforementioned guidelines.
And before you get comfortable, is it possible to zoom out where we can see the whole sheets?
Yep.
And if you would just walk us through those for the benefit of the commissioners. Not necessarily give them an explanation, just an opportunity to view the entirety of the sheet. So,
And instead of having the right side cut off.
yeah. And so I think there's some important information on there, both for the public and to remind commissioners, because again, we've seen this at design review if you were there. And there are a number of what I would call inspiration photos that help define the 6 or so elements that kind of bring this together. And David, feel free to chime in anything you think is important that Matt did not cover.
So we're going backwards a little bit, but this is the landscaping, some of the kind of the flair, I guess, the style, some of the textures and colors. Some of the inspirations for the exterior lighting, sails, the gathering spaces, and I don't know what the boats are.
They're a little larger, yes. It's definitely conveying the practical use for the event center. I mean, what they can really do out back now, as well as inside the building. So you're creating a whole new environment for them for new functions out there.
And then actually this one is full of them as well, which are a lot smaller. I think they're already in the other pictures
Yeah, and I think we can stop there.
Okay.
If that's okay with David.
And I'd add, we've worked somewhat diligent, the products we're using, and probably some of the best examples in the lawn area, instead of just being all grass, it's a mixture of the pavers and a very loose, so you're, and when you walk by, you realize an event space, and it's not just a lawn out there. So it's a mixture of materials, and probably one of the bigger pluses of the layout of the back lawn, the left side, which got the airline seating, is really set up for a wedding venue, which is really popular these days, and I think that brings an extra aspect that they've not had there at the convention center, and it's just a great backdrop back there. So we're trying our best to take advantage of the waterfront on the back side of it. Other materials are, there's some pervious areas under the kind of the grayer area. Back to, we're trying to manage stormwater in a more natural way, letting it filter on into the sand base versus capturing so much and putting it out there in the stormwater pond. So there's been a lot of thought and detail applied to this plan. A lot happens out there in such a small area. I think we've covered all the basic pieces. I will say the shade part, though a little more contemporary in flair, brings a use to a patio. We're in eastern North Carolina. And if you've all been in outdoor events, our solar, it can get a little tough to have an outdoor event. So that really gives the convention center another very viable use for rentable functions out on the outside.
Can you ask questions? How much will this increase the capacity of the convention center? Will it be able to accommodate larger conventions?
Somewhat larger conventions. A big plus is I can have multiple events at once. That's a challenge for most convention centers. You can have something in the ballroom, and I can have a smaller function now out back, and they can function independent. So there's a certain number of seats we could put on the patio, but probably the stronger aspect is if you take on a bigger function, and let's say you've got a crowd that wants to host 800 people, you might have, you need an area for training, whether they'll have classroom, you will usually have an expo, but then all of a sudden you got to feed them. So you're taking the same building that we've not grown, and you've given them an aspect. I can be set up for lunch out back, and you can start to move the same number. So it's, you should be opening the door for more people trying to rent the facility, because we have expanded what's available there versus just a ballroom and 2 breakout rooms.
The convention center is being repaired, but you don't plan to have this finished at the same time repairs are done?
No, definitely phased. There's we have an October deadline for an event coming. The contractor's working diligently to hit the mark for that. It'll open up, all life safety in place. And then there'll be more renovations moving on through the next months, on into early spring. So you'll see the back patio is probably more of late December starting back there. And they will continue working inside. There's a lot happening inside. It's hard to see from the outside as far as finishes, renovations, and new material in there.
All right, commissioners, what kind of questions do we have?
You mentioned the keeping the spider lily, the whispering bench that's also back there, is that to stay?
Yes. I know it all got moved for the storm, but everything I think is going back to its location.
On the landscape plan, do you have a list of the plant materials that are going to be utilized?
I do. We're in the final revisions of that. If I can, I need to send Matt the latest plans that are getting finished this week. I hate to send you something. We're in the final construction drawings, and that finally got wrapped up. So I can forward you a copy of that probably Friday, I think.
So what I'd suggest is when we get to the point of making a motion, that perhaps that ought to be a condition that the landscaping plan come back to us.
Correct. If there's any particular plans or something deemed, we can make some adjustments. So yeah, that's not a problem.
And David, is that what you consider a strong wind? You said the sales closed with a strong wind?
It's something we can set. It's all programmable. We can set it at whatever we deem the operation of the convention center. If they can choose to have it roll in at 30 miles per hour, 50, or 60, that's something they choose. As well as they might leave them not exposed until an event as well, just to maintain not as much wear and tear on the canvas up there.
How many supports do the sails have It's hard, I know you have that one strong one back toward the river,
It's,
but
it's rather unique. You've got a larger column that follows the curve of the wall, a single post that will hold, it's kind of the width of the sail. That's probably as good a picture as any. If you think of a long cylinder that holds the sail captured in there, I believe there's only 2 cables that run from there to the building, and it will roll out at the time to a point and then rolls back in at another time. So there's very little structure.
can they be removed in case of a hurricane?
They could be. You could take them completely off the pole, but once they're rolled in, there is very little wind resistance on the tube that houses them. And when the sail is rolled in, the structural column is more than adequate because it's really designed to take the normal wind loads on the cable system as well. So it's a very stout system for what it is. They are very fairly new, and this is one of the applications that they're almost designed for. You just need sunshade, but you don't need it out there all the time. And sunshades are usually so large, they're hard to set up for just an event. So you put in the automation part, you can roll them out when needed, roll them back when not needed.
Are the sails waterproof?
They're, somewhat water resistant, waterproof. They could, I do not remember the years of warranty, but it's definitely an outdoor product, as well as the fade resistant as well.
Okay, what other questions do we have? We ready to venture a motion? And while you're thinking that, I'd ask that our motion maker maybe consider adding public and open spaces. There's a guideline there that I think is relevant, and we can talk about that if and when it comes up. And then also, it seems to me accessory structures is kind of important in our deliberation of this particular application.
Mr. Chair, I move that the following application for 203 South Front Street be approved for a certificate of appropriateness, that it is not in congruence. Oh, let me start all over. Mr. Chair, I move that we find the application for a certificate of appropriateness for 203 South Front Street to be in not congruence with New Bern's Code of Ordinance sections 15-411 to 15-429 and New Bern's historical guidelines based on the following specific guidelines and findings of fact. Actable guidelines, waterfront modifications 2.9.3, 2.9.4, public opening spaces 2.2.1, accessory structures 2.6.3, design principles 3.1.5, modifications 3.2.1, 3.2.2, additions 3.3.3. The proposed project is within the primary area of visual concern. The promenade is not diminished by the design, and the design includes lighting that is not overly ordinate. The designs does not attempt to create a false sense of historical development, and that the materials and designs are compatible with the materials and designs of the existing building.
Okay.
Second.
We have a motion and we have a second.
You'll need to include the finding that it's not incongruous.
Okay, and that is not in congruence with the New Bern.
And a slight adjustment to the motion. Is that okay with the second as well?
Who was the second?
Jim Bisbee. I'd also suggest that the landscaping
Oh, yes, I forgot
come back
about
as a condition.
Yes, and that the
Thank you.
landscaping come back to staff for their approval and for the record.
Okay, so let me regroup a little bit. We've had a couple of changes. We've got a motion finding the application not incongruous based on some guidelines. James was kind enough to add the public and open space guideline 2.2.1 and accessory structure guideline 2.6.3. We can review that if anyone cares to. And then we also have a condition that the landscaping plan return to staff, and Matt will know what to do with it when that happens. Everybody understand the motion?
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Do we have any further changes or discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Can we have a motion to issue a certificate of appropriateness?
So moved.
Second.
Who did the motion?
Christian. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Jim, you the second.
James?
Aye.
All right.
It's all right. A man's only got so many hands. You're not ambidextrous, are you? No. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the issuance of a certificate of appropriateness? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, David, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
That gets you halfway home.
Yes, sure, I guess I'm right back.
Stay put, David.
Stay put.
Yeah, he's not going far.
Okay, so the next item I have on the agenda is also the convention center, and this is a screen wall around the mechanical equipment.
All right, so this is the beginning of the application here. Here we go. So, looks like we're gonna have to make this a lot smaller. Sorry again. Oh, boy. All right, well, I guess we'll have to live with that. That's too, no, that'd be good. Okay, so this is the first of the architectural drawings. This is an elevation of the side of the convention center that's between the convention center and the yacht club. So we're looking at the convention center at the top. There is looks like 4 ladders, but those are actually some indentations in brickwork. And then at the top of the ladders is a white line that is the current top of the visual screen, brick wall that's a visual screen around the mechanical area. Above that is the proposed new screen that will be located just slightly behind the brick wall. In order to screen the now to be elevated mechanical equipment. So there's a rendering. I guess that would have been an easier way to describe that. The green area is the new, and this is an alternate version. The previous one was the artificial ivy. I'll just go down from there. That one is not artificial ivy. I don't know where my drawing's going. Okay. Sorry. I don't know why. Nothing there. Okay.
You know, you're allowed to entertain yourselves during the meetings. We're just not supposed to know.
Here we go. Oh, wow. So you can see the problem here. This is quite huge, this drawing. So that one's not artificial ivy. And now we have a whole series of small drawings on the left. So we're going to have to choose between them, but or remember that great big one.
Goodness.
There we go. So this is, again, the current situation at the top and the bottom there. Inside, you can see the mechanical equipment is located on the ground, but would be elevated now to avoid a certain amount of flooding. Bottom is a photo or a cut sheet of the artificial ivy. There's a photograph of that artificial ivy installed somewhere. There's a close-up shot. You can see with the hand. And underneath the fingers, you can see there is like a plastic mesh the artificial ivy is attached to. And then at the bottom is actual installation here in New Bern at the old Neola building on Craven Street. And then our recommendations.
Thank you.
I don't know which one you want me to stop at.
Let's see. David, do you have anything to add at this point?
I think from our previous meeting, we discussed the ivy versus some form of metal panel. We can make either work. I have discussed with the owner if the group would rather see landscaping. They've acknowledged they'd be okay with that too. It'd be in front of the existing brick wall. We would seek some guidance on some plantings you would find already approved, so versus starting all over again. So I'm guessing if there's still resistance on the ivy, we're definitely acceptable to the metal panels and landscaping. So we're kind of flexible on that piece. So.
We'll delve into that in a little bit. So anybody in the public who would like to speak either for or against the application? Yes, sir.
I hate to ask a question that might be out of purview of H3 City, but has there been any serious discussion about raising the convention center to get it out of the floodwater so we won't be going through this again after the next storm?
Not to raising the facility, we have changed our interior finish material. I think it was really only a couple of inches that made it inside to a product that would not be damaged by water versus harder surfaces. Somewhat of the back patio construction is, should water come up, other than the landscaping might suffer, the rest of it can survive it. But there's no conversation about raising the floor level of the building at this point.
All right. Any other further public comment? Okay. Hearing none, let's close public comment period. And Matt, staff recommendation,
Okay.
please.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Gotcha. All right. Oh, boy. To include a new visual screen around the HVAC equipment for the convention center, the staff submits the following historic district guidelines as appropriate to this application. Utilities, 2.3.1. Statements of reason based on the information contained in the application in staff's judgment are: 1, the proposed project is within the secondary area of visual concern. 2, the proposed construction will screen the mechanical equipment from public view. And 3, the proposed project is not incongruous with the guidelines. Staff recommends the Commission approve this application for major exterior alterations at this time, citing the aforementioned guidelines with the condition that the option with the artificial ivy not be used.
Okay, thank you. All right, commissioners, where would we like to start?
I'd like to ask, at the review meeting, you spoke of, we had talked about the plants that you were going to choose to cover the mesh in front of the mechanical parts of the convention center. And we asked you if you would possibly have any photographs of plants that you might be considering.
I took it as existing photos of the trees that were, but have not considered which plant yet. As the owner has just agreed that as an option. We can find that. I'd have to get back to you. And that's also where I was seeking some guidance. If there's already some acceptable planting that will, in the appropriate height. Like I said, it's going to be a challenge to get something that doesn't grow too fast, that I need it to get up to about 12, 13 feet fairly quickly. So we'd be, like I say, seeking some guidance on that, as well as I can make some recommendations on what we think can survive the environment down here.
David, I know you mentioned that you guys are acceptable to either the to the panels that we talked about, or the vegetation. Did you bring any pictures of any of the paneling?
Not at this time. It's paneling structure's the challenge up there. So we're trying to decide what we can do that has a little wind resistance, but not too much. So we've looked at either a louver type scenario. Some of the corrugated metals are thin enough we can hold those as well. I would say if whatever the recommendation of the board is, if it's metal and/or the planting, we'll have to send back to you a detail of how we build that and what it would look like.
Okay, I think the planting, just our discussion with the growth and trying to keep it trim, I think you'll probably end up killing that out of. So I think the louvers would probably be
The better option, okay.
yes.
That's one, if that's the recommendation, I will will proceed with that and get some type of image back to you on what it should look like. It's still going to be metal, it'll be of the same green to match the product that's already on the building.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the amount of air movement I put through it's what we have to decide, because I'm still trying to surround the mechanical unit. And as always, you still have a higher wind zone here. I've got to be able to hold it up over some time, and footings are a challenge down here. So we have a lot to balance on how to hold it up within reason out there. But I think we're definitely comfortable with the louver scenario.
And the plantings, I mean, you're gonna have, you don't want anything that's dropping leaves into the chillers and
Correct. I mean,
that
it's
kind of thing.
there's
Yeah, it's like
fairly
no
decent.
magnolias.
Yeah, there's a decent area that we can get in some sizable plants along the public sidewalk there.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't have a great deal of area to work with, so I do need a fairly tall and narrow planting. You don't want to be pruning it constantly, keeping it off the sidewalk as well. So, like I said, if that's back to, I guess, I'm looking whichever way you're leaning, we're going to probably try to accommodate either one. We'll just have to be very specific on the planting if we go that route.
I'm curious about what is the issue with the artificial ivy? Matt, I guess I'm.
The plastic.
The recommendation was not
Well-
the ivy. What's the issue there?
Why don't I handle it for us?
Yeah, go ahead.
I guess
Discuss
I'm the
this.
one who has anxiety about the plastic ivy.
Why do you have
Not-
that
not
anxiety?
and I think our
You're not
chair,
the only one.
our chair did as well. And you weren't at design review?
I was.
Oh, you were?
Yeah.
Okay, but at any rate, there are two things that really concern me about it. And let me just start by saying I'm very supportive of the concept, David, that you presented and the options. I'm more of a louver guy.
I'm good.
Part of it is, we're in the same line of work, and I know how it is trying to control trees. But my concern is, one, that it's, essentially a plastic fence, which we don't allow.
Mm-hmm.
And I can see us explaining to many person who watches HGTV and goes to Lowe's and wants to know why they can't use all the nice fence materials that are plastic that they can readily buy. And then also, it concerned me so much, guideline 5.5.4, and these are guidelines for contemporary materials, states that aluminum siding, vinyl siding, masonite siding, artificial brick sheathing, thin set stone veneer, stamped concrete, and the important part, similar types of contemporary materials that imitate historic materials are not appropriate in the districts. And so in my mind, if I had to make my case, I would rest it on that guideline and the fact that even though the ivy looks real nice from a distance and whatnot, it's a material not being true, or being a faux historic material, which is in my opinion, a violation of one of our most basic principles. And so I think, at least from my point of view, that's where I get all wrapped around the axle, on this one.
There was some discussion of plantings. Are there three options that we're thinking about? Natural plantings, artificial ivy, or metal louvers?
Well,
Or no?
I'm having to give David a little professional courtesy here, because there's nothing more difficult to deal with than an application with options. And so since I got too many directions to go, I'm not quite sure how to help us make a decision. So what I would suggest is that our motion maker first, after we get through the formalities, stipulate which aspects or which options of the application their motion pertains. And I'm hopeful that depending on how all that shakes out, then we'll know what to do in our discussion that follows.
It was my recollection that what we were saying is if we weren't using the artificial stuff, and I think the part B of the concern of the artificial stuff was everybody's doing it kind of thing, you know, that was just a slippery slope issue. That if we were going with something that had more visual mass, then softening it was best achieved by actual plants in the ground. And so there is probably a pretty narrow spectrum of plants that are applicable to this situation that aren't going to, and I was teasing about the magnolia, you know, rain down leaves and cones and petals and all manner of stuff into the chillers.
Well, that's real.
But, yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
it's-
that's why I was
that is
teasing.
reality.
And magnolia is the very worst possible, you know, offender for that. But, you know, not do that, but achieve some measure of softness, which is what the architects were seeking in creating ever more mass in this mechanical area that's large to start with. So I think that was, you know, that was a way of serving both situations, you know, letting them use some kind of material that's acceptable to us and then softening it up a bit.
Well, I like the idea that rather than looking for landscaping that will mask entirely the mechanicals, that some combination of metal louvers or metal, some kind of construction that will then be softened by the placement, strategic placement of some landscaping, which will not hide everything, but at least break up the mass.
Yeah, and I think their thing with the artificial plant was that it, you know, added a little texture, added a little green, it softened it up. Am I
Correct. That's the initial approach was trying not to be quite so industrial like part of the other building.
monolithic.
There is some existing landscape in front of that Pierce brick wall now. I think they're wax myrtles and something else. They're probably the height of the brick wall now. Either way, if they could grow that tall, we probably wouldn't like the look of it. So I think we'll have to replace whatever's there in some form or fashion with some landscaping. And we can actually try to include that with our back patio work anyway and just pick the appropriate species. Like I said, the concern with landscaping is the screen. Very effective for a while. Long term, you got to keep them alive. And you don't want to be 5 years down the road and one insect takes out your screen. So it's the louvers, at least, if we take that route, will be there forever. But like I said, we're open for both. Just trying to get a feel for what would be the preference.
Well, I'm a louver guy, so I just, the vegetation, I believe that we'll run into a problem. I'm trying to picture what could be there that could really cover the area that you wouldn't have to trim regularly, that it would grow as fast as you would like it to grow. And I mean, unless it's an evergreen or something to that nature. And then what type of evergreen are we talking about? And so I just think the louvers would be more feasible for that area.
Okay.
My concern is if we go with the artificial plant, are we setting up a situation where, as Tripp mentioned earlier, that residents would feel comfortable putting plastic plants in their front yard?
Correct.
And I don't think that's the way to go.
Okay. Like I said, I think we already were reasonably through the two options early on. We weren't sure how the ivy is definitely a softer aspect. In no way would I want to try to grow real ivy up there because I think it would be gone within 2 years.
Yes.
So that was kind of threading the needle on what the options were.
All right, what other questions do we have that we haven't asked? No more questions for David? All right, well, let's serve up a motion, and again, let us know exactly which of the options you are including.
Okay, I will attempt A motion?
Very good.
I'm here to cheer you on, sir.
Good. I move that we find the application for certificate of appropriateness for 203 South Front Street to be not incongruous with New Bern's Code of Ordinance, sections 15411 through 15429, and New Bern's Historic District guidelines based on the following specific guidelines and findings of fact. The applicable guidelines: utilities 2.3.1, landscaping 2.4.3 and 2.4.4, and modifications 3.2.1. Findings of fact: the location of the project is in a secondary area of visual concern. It is not incongruous with the historic district guidelines, and that some combination of physical structure, metal, or other material to screen the utilities combined with some form of landscaping be used to soften the overall effect. And the condition would be that the plan as developed be brought back to Matthew for disposition. That make sense?
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion, we've got a second. I'm not sure.
Did you preclude the artificial ivy in there? I didn't
Yes.
hear it. You did?
I didn't preclude it, I didn't mention it, so.
Would you accept the amendment that we would preclude it?
I would accept that, sure.
Okay. And I think we need to be specific about whether the louver is included or not. And then I think the landscaping kind of works itself out when you bring back information that we asked for earlier.
We're looking for a louver screen and then some additional landscaping in front of the brick wall or in front of that same screen. Let me make sure I'm
Got to ask
understanding
that guy.
Yeah, making sure I'm understanding the question.
Basically, the louver screening, yes, and the landscaping would be just to break up the mass, not a continuous block of landscaping.
Is,
The landscaping is not in front of the screen, it's at the ground level.
Right.
and are we, I guess I'm going to make, does that landscaping need to be achieving the height of the louver, or is this just softening in general?
I think just softening.
Okay, very good.
Okay. And so, all right, so we got a motion and a second and some amendments. And I forgot who our second was, but were all those changes okay? All right, Jim. Okay. Any further discussion? You've answered my question already, Dr. Joe.
I call for the question.
All right. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Hearing none, can we have a motion? I'm going to go ahead and ask for a motion to issue a certificate of appropriateness.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. So, yeah, those were two applications, so I presume we need two full COAs. So that was my logic there. All right, David, thanks for your help.
Thank you very much for your time.
If you would, at your convenience, get information back to Matt.
I will.
And
I'll try to get him a new rendering
and
of the louvers and then the landscape.
and let's do it before you build it.
I got you.
I get
You
to have
don't
a
want
little.
that to be my example?
I get to have a little fun, don't I? A little fun with you. All right.
So it would be helpful if you got it to us before next Wednesday, which is their next design review meeting. I could just present it to them.
Okay. Let me check my renderings, Dad, but I'll
But
be,
it doesn't
well, I'll aim
have
for
to
that
be
next
right.
Wednesday, yeah.
Right.
Okay,
All right.
very good.
Okay. Thanks again.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Next item on the agenda, 211 King Street.
So, 211 King Street to include replacing a modern exterior French door with 2 new windows on the Tertiary AVC and replacing a louvered wall surface with wood siding on the secondary AVC. So, this is the louvered wall surface on the right to be replaced and look like the small wall with the same materials shown on the small wall to the back. And then this is the existing French door to be removed, both panels to be removed in their entirety and replaced with 2 of these such windows, which are already on the house. Okay. And some photographs of the actual house from the street. The top two and the bottom left are from the street. And then, and so is the one on the bottom right, which is basically the driveway on the left-hand side of the house. And then this is the back of the house, which shows on the second floor is the French door. And it also shows the context of the louvered wall, which is actually around the corner on the left side on the first floor. So you can't see it in this angle. But you can see that this was basically at some point decades ago another enclosed back porch, but on a much smaller scale. And so that louvered wall was constructed in relation to that, I suppose. And then we have our recommendations. So,
Okay. Thank you, Matt. John, do you have anything to add?
Yes. My name is John Audelay. I'm the applicant for 211 King Street. With regards to what I'm proposing in the photograph that in this particular photograph, this is now a conditioned space. They had enclosed it at some point in the past. I'm not sure what the louvers were designed for originally. Perhaps it was open. What I'm proposing is to take those louvers out, frame that wall, stud wall, and then siding to match the existing siding that's on the house right now. The existing siding is just an actual 1x6 component. It's not tapered. I had sent some measurements previously with regards to whether it was major or minor work, but it is a 1x6, and to match the existing siding right through there. There are a couple of windows up above it, single pane windows that let in some light. That was added previously. Just trim out around those to match the existing trim associated with the house. If we move up to the next picture, or the next picture down, this is on the back side of the house. This is the master bedroom. There's a low slope flat roof right there. It's an old double metal French door rounded at the bottom. The flashing detail actually just goes right over the bottom of that door. The door is operable, but it's been leaking for quite some time. Obviously not original with the house. I'm not sure whether there was a window there previously. What I'm proposing is a double window, 2 windows side by side to match the existing dimensions, to match the dimensions of the existing windows around the house. There are no double windows, as we had spoken about in the review meeting, and I would certainly leave the space in between those to accommodate the appearance of there being lead weights on the inside of those windows. The trim size on the it's just a very simple trim on the outside. It's 1x4s. It's a sill with the nosing that extends out to just cover the 1x4s. Approximately 1x6 at the header, and then a wood drip edge over top of that. Siding repairs up there to match the existing siding of the house.
Okay. Thanks, John. Anyone in the public who would like to speak either for or against the application? All right, hearing none, we'll close that comment period. And commissioners, have at it.
This seems awfully straightforward.
Oh, then give us a motion.
Oh, goodness.
What's good?
All right, I got it.
Recommendations.
Yes, let's hear
Oh,
Matt's
I'm-
recommendations.
I'm sorry, another faux pas on my part.
there we go. Sorry, 211 King Street to include replacing a modern exterior French door with 2 new windows on the tertiary AVC and replacing the louvered wall surface with wood siding on the secondary AVC. Staff submits the following historic district guidelines as appropriate to this application. Modifications 3.2.1, 3.2.2, and 3.2.4. Windows, doors, and openings 4.3.1 and 4.3.2. Statements of reason based on the information contained in the application and staff's judgment are: the proposed project is within the secondary and tertiary areas of visual concern. Second, the proposed construction will replace incongruous elements with congruous ones. And third, the proposed project is not incongruous with the guidelines. Staff recommends the commission approve this application for major exterior alterations at this time, citing the aforementioned guidelines.
Thank you, Matt. My apologies for the oversight. So,
Mr. Chair, I move that we find an application for a certificate of appropriateness for 211 King Street to be in non-congruence with New Bern's Code of Ordinance, sections 15-411 to 15-429, and New Bern's Historical District guidelines based on filing specific guidelines and finding the facts. Applicable guidelines, modifications 3.2.1, 3.2.2, 3.2.4, windows, doors, and openings, 4.3.1, 4.3.2. Findings of facts. The proposed project is within the secondary and tertiary areas of visual concern. The proposed construction will replace incongruous elements with congruous ones. And 3, the proposed project is not in congruence with the guidelines.
okay.
I'll second.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, can we have a motion to issue a certificate of appropriateness?
So moved.
Got a motion
Second.
and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, Mr. Aldelay, you good to go?
Thank you all very much.
I'll come by and look at it after you're done.
Thank you.
Let's see. Next item on the agenda, 416 to 418 Broad Street.
Thank you, sir. I was thinking they were at the movies.
Let there be light.
All right, our next item is 416 to 418 Broad Street to include infill construction of 8 new townhouse units in 2 new 3-story buildings, parking and internal garages to be located and accessed from the rear of the buildings. So, let's see, we're going to have to do some reductions again. That should probably do it. Come on. All right. All right, so we can see here, these are the proposed front elevations along Broad Street. These are some context shot photos starting on the opposite side of the street. What's the name of the restaurant?
Chelsea.
Chelsea Restaurant on the upper left. Then the next building along that row, it has a gap between the 2 buildings. And then to the right, which would be pretty much directly across the street from the project, is the 3-story building with 4 windows. Then immediately to the left of the project site is the Fireman's Museum, which we can see then here in the background here. The site is the grassy open space between the Fireman's Museum and the small 1-story commercial building, which is then also shown on the bottom right-hand photograph. Here's some more shots. Now, in this case, out the back of the project, let's see, how do I describe this? Okay, let's start on the right-hand side. You can see the back of the fire and side of the Fireman's Museum and pretty much the entirety of the site. Then a series of photos rotating to the left, but they're summarized here in this picture, much better to see, where you can see there is some parking along right in the middle of the picture there that will become an item of discussion. And then some, I guess, inspirational photos, I think we call them in the other one. We have these other photographs from around town that may come up for discussion as well. Then, this is the actual site plan here, colorized site plan. Can't quite get it all on. We'll start at the top. It's the Fireman's Museum, and there's a 12-foot gap between them and or that building and the property line, where it starts to get green. And then there's a 5-foot setback from that property line to the beginning of the buildings, both on the left and right. Broad Street is on the left, and the sidewalk is shown there in front of the properties, with a small grassy front yard for each, and an entry sidewalk and entrance ways that we saw in the elevation. To the right is the second building, which has the other 4 units turned 90 degrees, and the garage access is shown here from the middle of the property, and also the main entrance to these properties is there as well. So of interest is the large rectangular area about the middle of the screen, described as easement. It's actually on another property where the parking was in the one photograph, and this represents an agreement that the project owners have made with the adjacent property to allow use of that portion of the property for access to these various driveways along the back. So this is the same thing in black and white, I suppose. This is a rendering depicting the general, I guess
From the Chelsea.
general perspective of the street with the existing buildings shown in their location and size and mass. So, and it inserts the new buildings in there. On the right-hand side, it's the one that has some colored brick. The white area below that is not part of that building. It is the one-story commercial building. This is actually a very illustrative picture here, showing a lot of the character of the project in context. And then same with these as well. I'll start on the left here. Just different angle. You can see different features, perhaps, different relationships. This one here on the bottom is more of a person's eye view rather than a bird's eye view. And so you have a little bit more realistic angle on that. Also, very helpful illustration. And then this one provides more ideas to the detail of the facade for one of the units. All right. And these provide perspective of the rest of the site from the rear, showing all 8 garages and driveways. The projections on the roof are roof access stairways. The angle is the ceiling for the stairway. And again, more detail on the right of the rear elevations, showing some inset balconies above the doorways and the garage doors. And then an overall view from the ground or person's eye view. Some more photographs of the existing condition, and then placing the elevation in context with the rest of the elevations on that block. The top being the side of Broad Street where the subject property is, the bottom being the opposite side of the street, again with Chelsea's on the left. Some plans showing the first floor in this case with the garage. This is for the Broad Street side facing units with the garages on the back, entrances on the front. And then the second floor for each. And then the third floor for each. I'm just zipping through here just to show you that we have them if you want to discuss them. The roof and roof deck. Then for the other 4 units in the back of the property, with the entrance on the right of each garage. So that's the first floor, we have the second floor, and the third floor, and the roof. Then we have elevations, architectural elevations of each. These are the elevations of the front facing Broad Street. These are now color rendered of that. The side of the front building facing Broad Street on the left and the rear on the right. and then the rear of those units. And then now we go to the units on the rear of the property. That's essentially their front. And the color rendering of them. These sides, both the left and right sides. Sorry, I missed the right side of the other one. And then the rear, which is facing then the back property behind the Fireman's Museum. And then some product sheets giving some description of some of the various elements. And then a lot of the agreement regarding the easement is included here. And that's it. There's our recommendations, very tiny, but 2 pages.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Sarah, anything to add at this point?
I feel like I don't have to present anymore. It's
Oh,
wonderful. No, no, that's very good. The only thing that I would add is that, this project, as any project, has gone through many iterations before it gets here. And the inspiration really brought to us was the idea that it be a Federalist-style building and something that the owner thought would be, classic in New Bern. But everything that you presented is right on the mark.
Okay.
I guess I would like to say a couple other things, especially in view of the discussion we had at the design review meeting concerning the design of the facade. They did modify the design. I'll go back pretty much.
That very first rendering shows probably the best.
This one here, I think, works really well to show that they've actually increased the setbacks for the various units. You can see that. They've also changed the color of the stripes in the building from a somewhat muted gray, which tended to blend together with the color of the red, to a brighter white. I won't say fully bright white, but a brighter white or brighter gray. And they added the arches over the double door windows and the roofs over the front porches or stoops are also white, shown here. And the base of the building, the foundation, is also brighter white as well. So I think, they added actually, they had apparently the middle stripe across the top of the arches was there, but just as red brick. And now they've changed it over to the whiter brick. And so this helps to meet one of the guideline requirements or suggestions, or however you want to term it, for the design of the building to reflect the base, middle, and top kind of composition that is typical in classical kinds of designs. And so this provides a base, middle, and a top with that extra white line through there. And it also pops out a lot more of those those stripes also coincide then more with the Fireman's Museum. You can see on the left there also has all these various white stripes and white elements and white outlines. So that helps it to fit in with its neighbors.
And I would just say, in terms of the massing of the building, one of the things that we really looked at was the Chelsea block. And so, this building is 2 inches shorter than the Chelsea block and roughly the same square footage linearly along the sidewalk. So that idea of this mass on this block being appropriate. There are other masses like this in New Bern, in downtown New Bern, and I've shown some photographs of existing buildings within the district.
Let me hold you up right there for a
Okay.
second. Public comment. Anybody for or against this application?
I'm not for or against, I'm
All right.
kind of neutral. I have three questions. How much off-street parking are you allowing per unit?
Two garage spaces per unit, and there will also be parking in the driveway.
You don't have permission to park in the parking lot behind the units.
I'm sorry, what?
The parking lot behind the units with certain spaces, those pretty crazy. You don't have permission to use that next to the post office?
Yes, sir, we do.
You do have.
Yes, the owners have traded out an easement along there so that we will take a 20-foot strip. You can see it on, probably the rendered site plan is the easiest one to see it on. So that portion will be paved so that the rear units will have access to drive over that into their unit. If there is a rendered,
That one there?
no, I think if you go up a little bit more, it's on, it's the C sheet, C101. There it is. Yeah, so this portion right here, those rear units will come off Broad Street back here and be able to access the two-car garage while also driving along here. There will be no separation between this space and the existing parking lot that's there now.
I'm curious to know why you have roof access put over in. I'm understanding that we can get to the roof through the third floor.
The idea is that there's a 36-inch parapet height wall up there, so any of the owners of these townhouse units could put, have a party up there. Just be up there for fun, put a chair, lounge, just roof deck access.
What's the heated square footage of each unit?
It's roughly 2,000.
And what's the opinion of the Fireman's Museum?
That's 4 questions.
We went into the Fireman's Museum to go measure the height of the balcony down, and one of the gentlemen in there, said he wanted to purchase one of the units. So, totally offhand, I don't know what their official position is. They are not here tonight. We have not heard any opposition from them. They have not said anything to us at all.
Okay, any other public comment? All right, hearing none, we're going to close that opportunity. And it's time for a staff recommendation, I believe.
All right, sorry. Fell asleep there. Let me just go. Thought that would be quicker to read it out of it. So many pages, Sarah.
I know.
Okay, that's the next one, so, there we are.
Will this help?
I'm not gonna be able to read that.
Will this help?
Here, back.
You want it?
All right, I got it.
Okay,
Sorry.
it's all right.
All right. To include infill construction of 8 new townhouse units and 2 new 3-story buildings, parking and internal garages to be located and accessed from the rear of the buildings. Staff submits the following historic district guidelines as appropriate to this application. Development pattern 2.1.1, 2.1.2, 2.1.3. Utilities 2.3.1 through 2.3.7. Landscaping 2.4.3, 2.4.4. Parking 2.7.1 through 2.7.5. Design principles 3.1.1, 3.1.2, 3.1.4, 3.1.5. Infill construction, 3.4.1 through 3.4.4. Foundations, 4.1.3. Windows, doors, and openings, 4.3.1, 4.3.3. Entrances, 4.4.3, 4.4.4. Roofs, 4.5.1, 4.5.6. Masonry, 5.1.4 through 5.1.6. Metals, 5.3.3. Paint, 5.4.2. Contemporary materials, 5.5.1 through 5.5.4 and 5.5.6. So the statement of reasons based on the information contained in the application and staff's judgment are: the proposed project is a 3-story infill project on a block with 1, 2, and 3-story buildings on both sides of the street. The overall proportionate massing of the building along Broad Street is similar to the building at the southwest corner of Broad and Middle Streets. The proposed materials are congruous with the materials in the immediate area. The Broad Street facade design needs more detail on other elements of visual interest. The proposed project is mostly but not entirely not incongruous with the guidelines. However, modifications according to the conditions indicated below would make it not incongruous. Staff recommends the Commission approve this application for major exterior alterations at this time, citing the aforementioned guidelines with the following conditions. A, the building shall use details to articulate the facade and openings within the facade. Consideration should be made from the discussion in the guidelines regarding articulating the base, middle, and top of facades. The details that express but reinterpret traditional building details. The details that express but reinterpret traditional building details. B, the base, body, and edges of the facade shall be detailed to create texture and visual interest. And C, parking shall be screened from the remainder of the 409 Middle Street parking lot property.
Okay.
So,
Are those still your recommendations given the
those
changes?
are recommendations that were written before last week. So,
Okay,
Thank you, Matt. Okay, so
only
So Matt mentioned some things that you've improved.
Right,
Did he mention all of the things you have improved?
yes.
Okay. And then before I turn everybody loose on this, commissioners, under site and setting development plan, we've got basically 3 types of development patterns in New Bern. We've got a dense fabric, which is essentially our downtown core, where our buildings front the street and they essentially don't have yards. We've got what is called a tight weave pattern, which is, if you think of the residences in the historic district, they all kind of set back off the street a similar amount. They have a small grassy yard and a little grass on either side, grass in the backyard. And then we've got our waterfront development, which essentially attempts to describe the pattern of the convention center, which we heard tonight. Those buildings along the waterfront that tend to be way out of scale compared to historic properties as we are most familiar, and they also tend to have very large parking lots and things like that. Before we jump into things, I would like some concurrence from the board members of which development pattern we're classifying this particular application.
This is certainly a core project, and, you know, I was wrestling with the street curtain a little bit because it's on Broad Street, but I feel like since we saw that in design review, it feels like it's a little closer to the sidewalk, and I'm a little more comfortable with that. And as someone who lives directly on, you know, in a townhouse on the street, you know, it is awkward to pick up your paper on a main street in your nightgown without anything between you and the world. So I think Sarah's actually kind of threaded that needle pretty carefully.
Okay, are there any other opinions?
I have difficulty with considering it part of the core, and that's because when Allison Platt did the design, they made Broad Street into a boulevard, they made it wide, they put trees down the center to separate one side from the other. They are not continuous from one side to the other. The north side of that street is basically part of what we used to refer to as the residential district, which no longer is because the aldermen have seen fit to change things, but I don't see it as part of the core.
Well, that was just the way I was trying to describe it to help people at home know. I think it's better. Let me read dense fabric. A pattern of dense fabric features minimal yards, if any, most often reduced to small planting beds or planters. Dense fabric is created by structures that typically abut the front property line and share a common wall with neighboring structures. The streetscape is a defined facade with periodic openings accommodating narrow walkways that generally lead to an alley or interior of the block. An example is the downtown commercial district.
Right, and I don't see it as part of the
Okay.
downtown commercial district
All right.
because of the way Broad Street was designed and developed.
Okay, so you would consider it type weave then, because that would be the
Mhm.
other, because it's not
Yes.
waterfront. I presume we could all agree on that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, any other opinions?
I thought it was dense fabric personally. I mean, but I guess looking at the rest of the block, yeah, I still think it's dense fabric. But I'm gonna go with the majority, whatever we decide as the board.
And so I appreciate you humoring me. I think we've heard three opinions, one of which is somewhat different, and it may come into play later on, it may not. We'll just have to see what we end up talking about. So with that said, Peggy, did you want
Has the
to chime in?
setback changed from the initial meeting?
I
When-
would have to
I
ask.
might have missed that.
The only thing that has changed is that we set the buildings back from each other more. So now they're set back 1 foot 4 inches from each other, which means that we bump that towards Broad Street. So they're about less than a foot closer to Broad Street.
And Sarah, what was the setback of the Fireman's Museum?
It is from the front of the curb to the face of the Fireman's Museum, I believe is 25 feet. Yes, and so what we're proposing from the front, and I'm talking about the front of the curb to the front of the Fireman's Museum as 25 feet. And so for this building, the front of that curb to the first building is 18'4". And so,
Show a picture.
But how about the back of the sidewalk?
the sidewalk is 10 feet.
Okay.
So
really
it's 15 foot and it's 8'4". I mean, you could
Can we
put
see it?
up
It's
this,
like-
But the Fireman's Museum was a fire station where a fire or something had to come out
Yes.
between
Yeah.
out of the building.
well, and the ordinance states about the setback that it be within a zone of the averages. And, we really thought the way you thought is that you don't want to come right to the sidewalk. Even the townhouses that are farther down the street, down the middle of the block, on the little 2-story ones. I mean, they're set back roughly a bit more than these, and it's comfortable.
Okay.
It's actually like it's, oh, sorry.
All right, so, yeah, take it away.
This is completely away from any of the setbacks and a tight weave and so forth. I just wanted to know, is your back part of your townhouses, will they have the same facade as the front facing Broad Street, or is it going to be completely different?
That's a good question.
The only difference is on the front facades, we've shown the FIPON detailing over the window heads. I brought this picture, it's from Tom's Coins and Antiques, and it's a similar product that was used. And on that front Broad Street facade, that we would use that, and on the rear facades, we would just use a Rolock brick. But the same brick detailing all the way around, except for over the window heads on the Broad Street facade. That's the only difference.
Okay, the only thing I was asking is if it's going to be wider on the bottom, and like you've done on the
Yes.
front.
Yes.
You had the wider brick and not the gray. So,
Well, honestly, the brick has always been white. It's that rendering that just
Okay.
kind of messed it up, and we should have we should have fully rendered it before we brought it, but it was never gray. It's always been that white. But this is a new window head that was added over, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago over at Tom's Coins and Antiques. And that's a similar product to what we want to use on the Broad Street facades. But on the other sides of the buildings and on the rear ones, we're just going to use a different colored brick, like the townhouses down in the circle, as a Rolock brick turned, as a soldier course brick turned long ways up. And, maybe one of the colored ones might be.
That didn't answer your question? Oh, okay. Yeah, fire away again if you need to know.
The next one. Right there, yeah.
Okay. Hold on, I can see. Yeah. There we go. There we go.
Right, so over the window head, these are the rear units. You've got a brick detail here that is just a different colored brick with a soldier course above those windows to show that detailing similar to the front, yet different.
Okay.
At Discovery meeting, James, you were concerned about the sheer mass. Do you think it's softened any?
Yes, I believe, I'd like what you've done, Sarah, by sitting, having some setback.
Great.
Yeah, I really do, and it kind of, I see how you blended it in with the Fireman's Museum.
I think the renderings really helped a lot too.
Yes.
I don't think it was as clear at the last meeting.
Okay, well, what I see, it kind of blends, to me, it blends in with what's there.
Okay, great.
Okay, and it's not as massive as it was before. It just looked like a big rectangular building before, but
Yeah.
now it kind of, you can see the indentations. And I do like what you've done with the windows. It gives it a character, and I understand what you're trying to do now.
Okay.
Okay, any other general questions for Sarah? It's getting late. All right, if there aren't any, that doesn't mean it's our last chance, commissioners, but I do want to try to organize us and take us to a motion at some point. What I will do is use our design matrix. It's on page 1-16. And it essentially lists categories of work that are generally applicable to what would be considered, in this case, infill construction. And what I'd like to do is start with site and setting, and I kind of got into that a little bit with development pattern. But while we're talking, any comments about other chapters in our guidelines under site and setting, such as open space, utilities, landscaping? Staff's recommended a screen wall for the parking, and I don't think we have any accessory structures or signage or waterfront modifications. But any board member comments about building placement as we front the street? I know we talked a little bit about the setback relative to the Fireman's Museum, and that seems to be within the zone that the guidelines anticipate some movement there, but basically holding the line in the street. Any other questions in that area of the design that's being presented? We feel pretty good about moving on to design attributes?
Yes.
Okay. So let's talk scale, mass, and proportion. Form and rhythm, texture, details, but not all at one time. Pick one. So Matt, we might need to back out to see the whole rendering.
Okay, sure.
And if do we want to look at the back building or the front building?
That building.
Want to look at the back?
Okay, well, we were just there.
The renderings in the beginning might be easier to look at.
Yeah. To get the overall and the three-dimensional.
Yeah.
There's the back.
Yeah, can that zip out a little bit? So, any praises on form, mass, and proportion, or any criticisms? What have we got for Sarah here tonight?
Is that
We okay?
Is that considered the front or the back, though?
Well, I think that's a view from the rear of the property. So Broad Street is in front of the building to the left.
Yes.
And
But
then
I
I
guess
think
what she's asking is, it's of course the rear of the Broad Street buildings, but it's the front of
Oh.
the back building.
It's a tertiary area, according to your,
So-
the guidelines.
so Miss Peggy, I guess it's a little bit of both, depending
Yeah.
on
Mm.
what your thinking is. So I'm going to attempt to help out a little bit.
Really?
I do,
No,
do
I'm
what
not,
I
I'm
can.
talking about you. I'm talking about my laptop.
I'm not used to being criticized like that when I'm on TV.
I'm sorry.
In terms of form and mass, I wasn't as concerned as some of us were during design review, just because of the other buildings adjacent. There was only one outlier, one-story building that maybe created a little bit more discussion, but in my mind, that one-story building is the one that's out of place on Broad Street, not all the stuff around it. And so, I feel comfortable with the mass you have there, Sarah, and then also, it's obviously in 4 bays. And that just happens naturally because of the way you've stacked the units. I will say having the appearance of cornices in the renderings really helps your case a lot compared to where you started.
Yes, it does.
It's the same drawing.
Well, I know that, know that, but
I absolutely understand,
but,
and, yes.
I think you have textured with having the extra architectural part to your back building. You give some kind of what am I trying to say? It gives you some kind of flavor to what you have. It makes it look more appealing than just having looking like any other apartment building
Yeah.
in any part of town. And your facade on the front looks much, much better because you're in keeping with the Fire Museum.
Yeah.
And since you're not that far from that building, and that building is massive as it goes back,
Yeah.
that it makes it look, it kind of ties it in with the front with Broad Street in the downtown area of New Bern. But the back, it looks better with your rendition of the windows, and it makes it more appealing than just, hey, there's a building back here in the back.
Okay, great.
Looking at the building from the rear, I don't have an issue. My issue in design review, and to some degree now, still remains on the front and its relationship with Middle Street over, meaning that this is a 3-story building, and yes, the 1-story building probably is out of place, but everything else is 2 stories. So this one's 3.
But that's not true. The Sprague building is 3 stories.
Which one?
The Sprague, across the street.
No.
Oh, you mean just on
I'm
this side of the
talking
street?
about Broad Street as a boulevard, and we're only looking at one side of the street. The other side of the street is the core of the city. That's my view, okay?
Oh.
So I'm not comparing it to the Chelsea. This is not a commercial property. This is the residence. I'm not comparing it to this, what used to be the Sprint building. That's a commercial building. This is a residence. So I'm looking at it as a residence, and this is a 3-story residence sitting next to 2-story buildings and less. So that's why I'm thinking in terms of mass. And I think it is out of place in terms of mass. However, I also believe that the change in setback, that additional, it's only 8 inches, but boy, it made a tremendous difference in the appearance of the structure in terms of mass. It really did.
It did. It really did.
But urban housing is never like suburban housing, or nor should it be.
I'm not asking it to be suburban. All I'm suggesting is that.
And a multi-family residential building is nothing like a house with a swing set out back.
I would say there are 2 buildings on that side of the street, not in the core, one being St. Luke's and the other being, which is not a residence, but next to residential properties, and the other being the
church.
Family Life Center for the Baptist Church.
Yeah.
Being of a similar proportion, that one being set back much farther, but St. Luke's being, I think, 4 stories right on the corner.
Well, and St. Luke's was built in what, 29, 27?
Right.
So, I mean, it's difficult comparing that to this. However, I understand the point you're trying to make. All I'm suggesting is that if I take a look at that 1 block span, this is massive. Okay? And on that side of the street, because when I look at that, for me, when I look at that side of the street, I look at that side of the street and what goes behind it. What goes behind it is primarily residences. Okay? So what I'm seeing now is I'm seeing a 3-story building beginning to rise in the residential area. And is that going to be, something that we're going to be looking at with other pieces of property that may become vacant? I don't know. And it's not fair to you.
Well, what?
Okay? So, again, when I look at it, I think it's disproportionate. However, this is something that I probably can come to grips with because of the changes that you've made.
I would say that in that entire block, that square block, I'm the only house on that block. There's no other residence on that entire block of the Broad Street, Hancock Street, Middle Street, New Street. There's only 1 residence on that block.
Okay.
And there's a heck of a lot of surface parking.
Yes.
So I think we've already covered texture and or details a little bit in our prior discussion. Any comments on rhythm? There's a nice strong one on this project.
The only thing I'm wrestling with is the proportion of the balcony in the 2nd story to the rest of the building. And is it just a tiny bit small proportionally? And should you make that horizontal a little stronger for that element? And that's you could fiddle with that and see what you think. And
I mean, honestly, this building's gone through many iterations. We had the recessed balcony on the front for a while, which is a larger opening.
So just a stronger horizontal line.
Yeah, but to me, the idea of it being a Federalist style meant that it was drawn out a bit more and not so much widened. Those are 6-foot doors, which are similar to what is on the condos on Middle Street. There also, the Fireman's Museum has some Juliet balconies. I don't know, if you could just pan over just a little bit.
Parapet.
No, the other direction. Right there, yeah, which they're a little bit, the dark shape above the first bay to the right there actually is a Juliet balcony, door. And I don't know the actual size of it, but to me, it's more in proportion, it's taller than wider.
Mm-hmm.
And the other option is to go to an 8-foot, and all our other openings are 3-foot, so we were kind of keeping in that 3-foot, 6-foot vein.
Unless you would want to stretch it out to the width of the windows above.
That's a pretty wide.
It is.
You're talking about 12 feet. Then
maybe with some side lights or something. And it's just a personal thing, mostly.
Okay. Any other questions for Sarah in the area of design attributes before we move to design components? We all right? All right, under design components, we've got things like foundations, wall trim, and ornamentation. In fact, we were kind of already moving that way with our last conversation. Specifically, windows, doors, and openings, entrances, and it looks like we've kind of got our recessed entrance, at least on this facade, and maybe on the back one as well.
Yes.
We also cover roofs, and I don't think accessibility and life safety is going to generate a whole lot of conversation.
The decks and patios on the rooftop, Sarah. What is the not that picture, Matt? Well, we can use that one, but go down one. It was showing it a little bit better. Well, go up one. I apologize. One more. Right there. What is the material up there for the slant? See how it's slanted?
It's so each of the units, the owner wanted to be able to walk up an actual stair, and that roof deck, whether it's built out as an actual deck up there or not, is going to be left open to the buyer. They don't want to pay for that right now, so what we're proposing is what's shown. You know, if there are changes, if somebody wants to, like in the townhouses down in the circle, we did a paver up there that required a handrail. This will not require any additional hand railing with the parapet wall being the height that it is. So there's hardy board on the side of that with a metal roof covering the sloped area of the stair itself.
And just for the record, while we're talking about materials, what kind of roofing?
A membrane roof.
Membrane type roof, and
Yeah.
then if you would run through windows, doors, and anything other material other than masonry that brings us down the facade.
It's a vinyl window, aluminum railing. It's the seamed metal roof. We've got a 5-pond detailing over the windows in the front. The base we have described as a ground face concrete masonry, which will give the appearance of a stone material. And everything else is we've got the concrete walks. There was some debate about whether they should be brick or not, but I think they've just gone with the concrete walk in the front with a fiberglass door and metal garage doors on the back.
And so there were a few words you used that might set off alarms, but because this is infill construction and a record of its time and place, we do allow use of contemporary materials, the more offensive ones in limited applications.
But the windows still would have a 3-dimensional grille with a shadow bar.
Sarah, I just assumed the door to the ceiling, to the top, would be for maintenance of the roof. Am I hearing you say that you anticipate someone wanting to put a gazebo up there and have?
If somebody wanted to put a gazebo up there, that would absolutely come back here. We looked at proposing a covered roof structure up there, but the owner decided to not do that. And so it's accessible for someone to go up there and put a table and chairs. Granted that they put down the appropriate material to be able to walk over that membrane roof. The air conditioning units would be up there, but you would not be able to see them since we've got the parapet wall high enough that you will not see that at all.
How tall is the wall?
The parapet is 36 inches. We've got, it might be shown, we've shown our floor plate at 2 feet, and once it gets engineered, I think that'll come down, and so that gives us a foot to play with inside the structure that you won't see to get the height of that parapet wall where we need it to be. Because we didn't want to have to add any additional railing up there that would be seen, you know.
From the street.
Yeah.
All right, I've run through my list of things. The bell's tolled. Do we have other questions for Sarah at this point? I think we've had a pretty good overview of what the application entails.
I have a question for Matt. So, staff recommendations would change based on what Sarah has submitted, correct?
That's correct. That's correct.
And then while we're talking about mechanics, I guess our condition would be that screen wall would need to come back.
What screen wall?
That's recommended
Parking area.
for
For
the
the parking.
parking,
There, a wall
or well,
Screen, fence.
it could be landscaping.
Whatever.
between what? Because there's no separation between that parking lot and the easement is part of that
Yes.
parking lot. So, I mean, it's all,
Let's look on the site
site
plan
plan?
just to make sure we're not missing it.
Is it this way,
the,
Sarah?
yeah, it's that
Where
way.
that way
Uh,
might be applicable.
Or, I guess.
I think it's the other way, yeah, from the beginning.
Too far now?
I think you went
Too
too
far now.
far. There it is. Yeah, so that,
Yeah. Let's-
So our recommendation is only based on the one guideline that points out that parking is to be screened. So I don't know if the particulars of this case whereby the property owner, which is not, so the property owner of the large parking lot is expecting to still be able to access this at the same time
absolutely, yes.
as the proponents for this project, then that may be a mitigating factor in your decision about our recommendation.
You back out a little bit.
What I would say is that, we're providing a driveway to, 2 garage spaces. It's not that we're providing a parking area in this space. That easement is part of the parking, of the Centenary United parking lot back there. And so the owners have traded out a different easement where they had a different access so that they could have this easement and get in and out. We're not providing a parking lot back there. That easement is already part of the parking lot. We're providing an area for people to drive over
Right.
to get into the,
You have to imagine,
The
you can see
garages.
here it says
Yeah.
property line. This is already the property of the church, and they're currently using that for the parking of those vehicles
Yeah.
back there. So obviously, those vehicles couldn't remain there while they're trying to use this for access to the garages. However, it sounds like because the paved area will continue directly up to the edge of this new pavement, the church is, I guess, looking at being able to drive across that space as well as necessary.
yes, absolutely.
So it seems you have a screen with the landscaping right there in the
Right
outline.
there.
It is here.
And
Yes.
depending on what that really is, it's probably sufficient.
And on the other property line as well. I mean, we did actually consider gates along those rear units, but, I mean, the reality is it just seemed overly complex, If that becomes something necessary in the future, we'd bring that back. But I think at this point in time, it's much simpler to leave it all part of that parking lot, plant the trees in the front, which will act as kind of a screen anyway.
Which reminds me, that probably needs to be a condition in our motion about landscaping, as it has been in prior
That needs to come
applications.
back. It's
Yeah.
not defined right now. Yeah.
Particularly because of the function of the screen. For sure. Okay, what else we want to talk about?
Oh, I didn't ask about the landscaping. Is that going to be trees? Is it going to be bushes?
What's shown on the plan is a combination of grass, trees, and bushes. It is undefined right now, but they absolutely plan to define it. But what we are proposing will be planted in those areas. Trees where we are proposing. I don't know what kind of trees, or they're going to have someone put all that together.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Sarah? We feel like we're ready to make a motion?
Well, I need clarification on staff recommendations on this. Okay, since Sarah has made the changes and we talked about the screening that's going to be off to the side, that's a possibility of the trees and the grass and the bushes right there could act as a screening. Does that still need to be considered on this, and what are your recommendations now?
So they already show, I'm not sure if I understand entirely, but they already show, let me go down,
that one right there. So
they already show trees and shrubs in this landscaped area, in this area here, which would screen the neighbor's parking.
And trees on the other property.
And from the design review meeting, it wasn't clear to me. In fact, I think I had asked the question about this edge being traversed or not, and whether or not there would be a fence or a wall or a curb, and I think the answer was curb at that point. So with that in mind, if you're going to put a curb in there, I felt like you should put in a fence since it's required by the guidelines. However, tonight it sounds like that's not actually the case. There was maybe misunderstanding at the meeting. Will not be a curb there per se, but that access across that line is intended as, I guess, part of the understanding of the easement. So you can't actually put trees.
Okay,
or
and that's where I was going with that, because that's the way I understood it, that the property owners would have access to both.
And also then it becomes a little bit unnecessary, I suppose, to screen one driveway from a parking lot. In one sense, however, you don't know what the future development of that parking lot would be. So, but I think the other things are more relevant.
Okay, does that help us out any?
I'm gonna try making this motion. I think I got it.
I think Matt may have to do it, and one of us just take credit.
I move, Mr. Chairman, I move that we find an application for 416 or 418 Broad Street, a certificate. I'm sorry. I move that we find an application for a certificate of appropriateness for 416 or 418 Broad Street to be not in congruence with New Bern's Code of Ordinance, Section 15411 to 15429, and New Bern's Historical District Guidelines based on the following specific guidelines and findings of fact. Developmental patterns 2.1.1 to 2.1.1 through 2.1.3. Utilities 2.3.1 through 2.3.7. Landscaping 2.4.3, 2.4.4. Parking 2.7.1 through 2.7.5. Design principles 3.1.1, 1.2, 1.4, 1.5. Infill constructions 3.4.1 through 4.4. Foundations 4.1.3. Windows, doors, and openings 4.3.1 through and 4.3.3. Entrances 4.4.3, 4.4.4. Roofs 4.4.5 through 4.5.6. Masonry 4.1.4 through 5.1.6. Metals 5.3.3. Paint 5.4.2. Contemporary materials 5.1 through 5.4.5, 5.5.6. Okay, where am I at? Findings of facts. The proposed project is a 3-story infill project on a block with 1, 2, and 3-story buildings on both sides of the street. 2, the overall proportions and massing of the buildings along Broad Street is similar to the buildings at the southwest corner of Broad and Middle Street. 3, the proposed materials are congruous with the materials in the immediate area. 4, the Broad Street facade design needs, we won't do 4. And we won't do 5. Oh, well, we don't.
We modify number 5.
Right, we'll modify number 5. The proposed project is not congruous with the guidelines. Yes, okay. Period.
You're doing good.
And is there anything else I need to add to that?
I just think some landscaping to return.
Okay, yes, and that landscaping,
Not that I would interfere.
once decided, we brought back to staff for their approval.
Okay, I think we've got a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Everybody okay? Everybody understands the motion? All right. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, hearing none, do we have a motion to issue a certificate of appropriateness?
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right,
Thank you very much.
you're welcome. Thank you. All right. Okay, next item on the agenda. But wait, there's more. 415 and 417 South Front Street.
These are to include, or this project is to include expansion of the rear deck, roof over the rear deck, and construction of a louvered fence in the Tertiary AVC. Oh, boy.
Yeah. Hard to keep
Okay,
you focused at
that's
this
it.
point.
Here, these are some photos of the existing condition. This is essentially the deck behind Blackbeard's and the, I guess, axe throwing shop
Or oyster bar.
and future oyster bar. This is the existing deck plan. This is the elevations of the existing deck, which is on the right of both of these elevations. This is the, then the third elevation, which shows the deck on the left. This is the future plan. Oh, yes, it doesn't quite go all the way over to the axe throwing store, right? So, but is an expansion of the existing deck around behind the freezers, and then also adding or changing the adding an access into the second store, the oyster bar. Page down. And then this is a roof plan. This is a roof framing plan. And now these are elevations which give you an idea as to the height and size and some of the details of these. On the upper drawing, it's on the right-hand side. And then on the middle drawing, you can see some of the details of the the roofs over the entranceways and the walkways there. And the bottom is from the basically from the bank parking lot. These should now show with the louvered fences or temporary walls. I don't know how they'll be described here. And that's it. Yep. So I should probably not stop there. Which ones you want to go with?
If you could just, can you zoom out just a little bit?
Yep. Actually, shortcut.
There, yeah, just to
Yeah.
see we just
Oh.
had some inspiration photos in there.
There you go.
The idea, coming from the comments from design review, and, the whole idea of putting the roof on this is to try and control sound, and adding in louvers in these back panels we fully anticipate those louvers to be something that could be removed. It's within the structure, and that's why we've kind of shown it in two different ways. The structure of it and then the louvered panel. I think that once they get the louvered panel in there, it will not be removed. And then on the inside, on the ceiling, to have, we talked about a draped ceiling of sail material. So that space back there provides a nice, tall outdoor space that will help to control whatever sound is emanating from there.
Okay, we've heard from the applicant. Do we have any public comment? For or against?
I'm having trouble spotting this on East Front Street. What is it close to?
That's Blackbeard's triple play.
Black on the
Next to Wells Fargo?
Yeah, right next to Wells Fargo.
On the south side.
Well,
Right next to
Yeah.
the farmer's market, in between the farmer's market and Wells Fargo.
Yes, the old print shop. Yeah. Yeah.
okay, any other public comment? Hearing none, I believe that brings us back to a staff recommendation. Nothing's easy, is it?
We're gonna have to find something else to do next time.
Yeah.
All right. So, 415 and 17 South Front Street to include expansion of the rear deck, roof over the rear deck, and construction of a louvered fence in the Tertiary AVC. Staff submits the following historic district guidelines as appropriate to this application. Accessory structures, 2.6.1, decks and patios, 4.6.2, 4.6.3, accessibility and life safety, 4.7.2. Statements of reason based on the information contained in the application and staff's judgment are: 1, the primary structure is not a contributing resource in the district. 2, the proposed project is a deck that is disconnected from the structure. 3, the roof structure and louvered fence is to be constructed of wood. 4, the ramps are not in the primary ABC. And 5, the proposed project is not incongruous with the guidelines. Staff recommends the Commission approve this application for major exterior alterations at this time, citing the aforementioned guidelines.
Thank you, sir. All right, so before we jump in, fortunately, acoustical performance has nothing to do with the guidelines, so let's not talk about it. Secondly, I think we are essentially an accessory structure in tertiary area. Third, I don't know if my fellow commissioners noticed, but there are two types of roofs: a low slope roof. There's also a little bit of standing seam metal that kind of connects over walkways that goes back into each of the buildings, and whoever our motion maker is might want to pick up guideline 4.5.4. And so with that said, where would we like to start? Would we like to start with a motion? That's just a question.
Sure. I'll make a motion. Actually, I move somebody turn these little lamps on so I can see to make my motion. Is there a way for that to happen? Does anyone know?
Yeah, I think
Just pull the left.
Those don't work.
these lights, the switches on the
Pull the up top.
I know that, but I'm.
the switches on the end of the
switch?
stairs there. James will get
Oh, thank you, James. I
one.
appreciate
Let that not distract us.
Okay, that's very helpful. All right. I move that we find the application for 415 South Front Street to a certificate of appropriateness for 415 South Front Street to be not incongruous with New Bern's Code of Ordinance, sections 15-411 to 15-429, and New Bern's Historic District Guidelines based on the following specific guidelines and finding of fact. Accessory structures, 2.6.1, decks and patios, 4.6.2, 4.6.3, accessibility and life safety, 4.7.2. Based on the following findings of fact: the primary structure is not a contributing resource in the district. The proposed project is a deck that's disconnected from the structure. The roof structure and louvered fences to be constructed of wood. The ramps are not the primary AVC. The proposed project is not incongruous with the guidelines. The following condition will be attached: that the roof structure that is metal be in keeping with the guidelines, and that be brought back to staff for their approval.
Okay, we've got a motion. Have we got a second?
Second.
We've got multiple seconds. So Matt, you can take your pick. Any further discussion? Everybody understand the motion?
Can we just add roofs 4.4, 4.5.4? I know you said, but can we just add that as a
Absolutely.
as a guideline?
For
So that-
sure. So added.
And the second agrees?
Yes.
Okay, everybody understand the motion? I think we just added an additional guideline citing to eliminate a item coming back as a condition. Is that correct? Okay. All right. Hearing no further discussion, we okay, Miss Peggy? Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, can we have a motion to issue the certificate of appropriateness?
So, second.
Got a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.
Thank you.
No, thank you. Next item on the agenda, 311 Bern Street.
We have to thank them for being very patient, as well as,
Yeah.
of course, the next applicant as well.
Yeah, no luck of the draw there.
So, 311 Bern Street, to include roofing replacement, front porch floor replacement, landscaping removal, and new picket fence in the primary AVC, siding repair in the secondary AVC, and removal and enlargement of the rear porch in the tertiary AVC. Some of these are after-the-fact COA items. This was a prevention of demolition by neglect property that was sold to this new owner. So you may already be somewhat familiar with this one. And now we're looking at some pictures from the time when it was, part of the demolition by neglect documentation. This being the front porch buckling floor, front porch railing. You saw the siding in the previous one. It shows the the vines that have been overgrowing all the way up to the ridge of the third floor roof. And so, what is this? Oh, and then this is the rest of this is documentation regarding that demolition by neglect stuff. It is actually an active demolition by neglect issue. But since we now have this new owner who has already undertaken some improvements, let's see, that's not it. But we have pictures in here, some of the new improvements. We do not. Sorry, and I apologize. I assured the applicant that we would have that in the application, but we do not have it in this. And I don't have it on the flash drive either. So, that's it from all I can do for now.
Right. Thank you, Matt. Ms. Catherine, can you give us an overview of the scope of your repair work?
I sure can.
Okay.
We started with a replacement of the roof, and we did replace it with black architectural shingles. And I kind of moved on that because the hurricane was coming and the roof was leaking. So we moved with that. And then the front porch, we talked about that in the last meeting. We had put the, I think it's the 5 or the 6 inch planks down, but we removed that. And so we're going to be putting the tongue and groove, 3 inch tongue and groove on the front and the back. And we're working with precision molding on that. And then let's see here. I'm considering a front picket fence. That's not, we haven't moved on that yet. I'd like to have that approved if possible, so that when we decide, or if we decide to do that, we can move on that. And the siding, which you saw the hole, we've replaced that with the same, which is the German siding, or we are replacing. We have not completed that yet. And I believe that's it for now. We will be repainting once we get to that point. And so I think that might
Very
be
good.
it.
And I failed to thank you for taking on this project. We very much appreciate your attention to it and want to help you along in your endeavor. Matt?
Thank you.
Can we get your description of the rear, what you're doing in the rear porch?
Oh, yes. We want to extend it out about 3 feet from the door, come out a little bit, because it's very tiny. I think we mentioned that last time too. We'd like to be able to put a little chair or something on it. So we want to bring that out 2 to 3 feet. Just extend it out a little bit onto the patio.
2 to 3 feet more than the existing porch?
Yeah, than the existing. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And before we get into too many more details, is there any public comment either for or against this project? Would you like to say a few things? I need you to come up to a microphone so people on TV can hear you.
Please state your name.
Hi, I'm Leanne Kingsbury. I live at 315 Bern Street and directly next door. I have for 10 years looked out at the hole on that side of that house. So I have no reason to not be in support of it, let me say. None whatsoever. We are absolutely thrilled that Kathy has taken this on. I have a couple of questions, and I'm not sure that HPC is really the right place. So I'm just hoping I can ask these questions, and you can say, go here and ask those questions.
You've got the floor. Shoot.
I do want to hear more about the picket fence. I just don't have a sense of what that is, and well, I know what it is, but
It'd be the same thing as the 3 doors down.
is what Mark has on his house. I sort of thought that. So earlier, in an earlier project, one of the things that showed up was a requirement for a building permit, and I don't know if that's required for Kathy's property. I'm wondering whether it's Kathy's property or really any. I'm obviously thinking about this one because it's directly next door to me, and we both have solid wooden houses. How do we ensure safety? 3 weeks ago there was a fire at a wooden house on Pollock Street. Happened to be an electrical fire in the midst of a renovation. That's terrifying, and I would think it would be terrifying for her. It's certainly terrifying for me as a neighbor. I just don't know how we ensure that in terms of making sure that everything is done the way it's supposed to be done from a safety standpoint.
Essentially, the chief building inspector is already very intimately involved in this project. I can say without a shadow of a doubt, there is a building permit somewhere.
Great.
And that they will be inspecting all the work that takes place.
Great. That's really helpful to know. Just we've watched this. We filed
Sure.
the demolition by neglect or paperwork for that because we just watched it fall apart.
Sure.
So that's really helpful to know.
So take some comfort in that, and obviously that there are processes and procedures in place at the city that would preclude most of the hazards from occurring that you're concerned about.
Was wondering how that is is that part of this process? So that's good to know. That's great.
It is, and so maybe a good point for a little PSA. This property has been identified by a predecessor board as being a property being allowed to be demolished via neglect, hence the nomenclature of the rules that we've applied, and that process involves the chief building inspector attempting to work with the then current owner to have those repairs made. If an owner does not choose to participate and make repairs that need to be made to not only save the historic property, but also make it safe for the neighbors, our goal is to force a change of ownership, which is what has happened in this case. Part of that process involved the chief building inspector listing exactly what needed to be repaired before they would release it. Doesn't mean it would be look nice necessarily, but it wouldn't mean was dry inside.
It was safe.
It wouldn't have, loose electrical wires and plumbing wires. It would be secured, and essentially it wouldn't be a hazard to the public.
Well, that's great. Well, I appreciate that information. Thank
And
you.
so, Miss Catherine, the reason I thanked her so much is because she's essentially taken on a project that most of our other neighbors in the community might not take on otherwise, just because I guess it's kind of fun, but it's kind of expensive. And if you've already got a place to live, which you would need in this case, because you certainly could not live there, it kind of takes all the fun out of it, unless you've got a soft spot for historic preservation and the city of New Bern's downtown historic fabric. And that's why it's so important that people like Miss Catherine, who are interested in preserving these properties, come forward. And I can promise you on behalf of my colleagues that we'll do everything we can to make it as painless as possible for you to be successful. And we want you to be successful. I'm pleased to tell you, you are not the first person to take on such a challenge and be successful. We've got 2 or 3 examples of when that's happened in the recent past, but we look forward to adding your project to our list. So those that follow in your footsteps, we can shower them with accolades as well. So.
We are absolutely, certainly in support of it. It's a treasure. It's a great house, and it'll be really nice to have it fixed up and not look at that hole every single day. So.
That it will.
Thanks for answering the question.
You're certainly welcome.
I'd like to comment.
Let me hold you for any more public comment. We all good? Okay, Miss Catherine.
I kind of want to address Leanne's comment, because I totally understand that about the safety. And just to let you know, I do have an unlimited general contractor's license, and I've been in commercial construction for a long time up in Raleigh. As some of you may know, we are highly trained in safety in commercial, really far more than, honestly, a lot of subcontractors in the residential. And but for instance, we will not let anyone on our property that does not have workers' comp general liability, and that's been a bigger challenge than the house in New Bern, finding someone. But we have that, and also on the major trades, the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing trades, I'm very, very picky about that. Like one of my carpenters wanted to do the plumbing this weekend, and he could do it, but I said no. We are going to get Scott Plumbing in. I want all certified mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. So we have Scott Plumbing, we have Seaboard Electric. He's already been through and done a complete, thorough inspection on the electrical, and before we put the plywood down on the inside. Now he's coming back to look at some more stuff. We've got Mike Parks, I think it's Michael Parks, HVAC, and then Carolina Foundation. He came in, Sean Cochran, and he has gone through the whole thing. And so also I have my brother, Rick Askew, he's been a contractor here forever. He's been in and out and supposed to look at it today. So I just want to address the safety. I'm very cautious about the safety, and it is very important that we don't have any problems or even accidents while the people are working. So I just want to reassure Leanne about
So
that.
we thank you for that. You've tapped into a good, reputable group of local tradespeople, and you tell Rick I said to behave himself, because I know what he's been up to.
Who's that?
Your brother Rick.
Oh, you do know?
We were in Rotary together.
Aw.
So.
Well, he was here today looking around.
Okay.
He goes, I'm going to stop
I
by
hadn't
that
seen him in
house.
a while, but tell him I said hello.
I will.
Okay, so we've got an application. We got a few loose ends. There's some pictures that Matt has on file. But for my fellow board members, with the exception of the fence elevation, do we feel comfortable moving forward on the description that Ms. Catherine gave us in terms of the scope of work?
Yes.
Most of it seems to be pretty much replacement in kind as well. So, okay, thank you for that.
I went and looked at this project today. It's fascinating to me because the backyard is full of these gorgeous hardscapes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's very confusing. Isn't it?
All right, so what I would suggest is when a motion arrives, maybe shortly, that we have the fence element come back to staff, and then we can kind of go from there. Whether it has to come back here or not, we'll make that determination at that time. But essentially, Miss Catherine, all we need is a picture. You mentioned another property nearby that it would be like the fence that you would like to build, maybe.
Yeah.
If that turns out to be the
Yeah,
case,
if
you
it
can
is.
simply take a picture of it
Mhm.
and get it to Matt. Otherwise, you could have Rick draw you up a nice little detail, now that I know who you are.
I'll do that.
And, essentially there are some guidelines pertaining to the spacing of pickets or balusters, and also vertical dimensions on the balustrade and whatnot. So, okay, enough of that. What other questions do we have for Ms. Kathy? We got a motion, maybe?
No, staff recommendation.
Oh, I'm sorry. I blew by the staff recommendation yet again.
So 311 Bern Street, staff submits the following historic district guidelines as appropriate to this application. Modifications 3.2.1 through 3.2.5, walls, trim, and ornamentations 4.2.1, 4.2.2, entrances 4.4.1, 4.4.2, 4.4.4, roofs 4.5.1, 4.5.2, 4.5.3, wood 5.2.1, 5.2.2, and paint 5.4.1 through 5.4.4 and 5.4.9. Statements of reason based on the information contained in the application and staff's judgment are: 1, the project elements are located in the primary, secondary, and tertiary AVCs. The alterations done and proposed adhere to the aforementioned guidelines, and the proposed project is not incongruous with the guidelines. Staff recommends the Commission approve this application for major exterior alterations at this time, citing the aforementioned guidelines.
Okay, thank you much. All right, board, now what do we want to do?
Mr. Chair, I move that we find an application for certificate of appropriateness for 311 Bern Street to be in non-congruence with New Bern's Code of Ordinance, Section 15411 through 15429, and New Bern's Historical District Guidelines based on the following specific guidelines and finding as facts. Modifications 3.2.1 through 3.2.5, walls, trims, and ornaments 4.2.1 through 4.2.2, entrances 4.4.1, 4.4.2, 4.4.4, roofs 4.5.1 through 4.5.3, wood 5.2.1 through 5.2.2, paint 5.4.1 through 5.4.4, and 5.4.9. Also, I would like to add fences to that, which will be, let's see which one I want to use. 2.5.1, 2.5.2, and I believe that is it. Reasoning, findings of fact, the project elements that are located in the primary, secondary, and tertiary AVCs. The alterations done and proposal adhere to the aforementioned guidelines. The proposed project is in non-congruence with the guidelines with staff. Also, I'd like to add the following conditions: that the fencing be brought back to staff for their approval.
And if I'm also add a picture of the fences nearby where she lives.
Yes, accepted.
Okay, so we've got a motion. I think we need a second, maybe.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Who was the second?
Dr. Joe?
Joe?
Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Motion to issue a certificate of appropriateness.
So moved.
Got a motion, maybe a second.
Second.
Got a second. All right.
That was
All-
Peggy.
It was. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, Ms. Catherine,
Thank you very much.
thank you so much for your cooperation.
All right, and finally,
Yeah,
last but not least, right?
yeah, I think
As
it's
they say.
202 Johnson Street.
to include construction of a new carport over an existing driveway in the secondary AVC. This being the application, this being an aerial to help describe the location. So you can see it's on the corner of Johnson and East Front Street. The top of this designates a driveway. That's where the driveway is leading to the carport that we'll see in a moment. But the front of the house is out on Johnson Street. So this is an architectural drawing of the location for the carport, which is where the two cars are currently shown. This is an existing floor plan or site plan. And you can see the two-track driveway leading to then a concrete pad. On the left is an existing very small garage. The house is at the bottom. Then this is an elevation showing the side of the house where on the right, the side of the house where the carport would be adjacent to. And the existing garage is again existing elevations. So now the new shows 8 new posts here on that concrete pad area. And then the actual construction shown here on the right. You can see the carport, the 4 columns, which would be 8, of course, columns here in elevation, and then this small thin roof area here shown here is the roof of the carport. On the left, you can see it is not attached in any way to the existing structure. And again, that low flat roof, somewhat, I guess, could be exactly the same slope as the existing. These are some similar ones, but of course these are not them. This is one here is way steeper than the other one, but gives you an idea that some of these exist. That one's on Broad Street. This one is actually attached to the house. It is East Front Street, has somewhat more detail that is also very similar to the house itself. The one on the right is kind of a 2-story, almost porte cochere, because it's an extension directly of the roof itself. Porte cochere. That one is just to show some in the background, I think, an accessory structure similar. It's not, I don't think, helpful. This one is a more modernist carport type of structure, but it's not sure if it's actually a carport or if it's more like a yard structure for picnics or something under there. And then, of course, a very large attached, it's actually a carport, almost like, looks like garage, however. So that's pretty much it. So you can use these as your discussion illustrations.
Okay, thank you. Sarah, anything to add?
I thought there were some existing photos of maybe on this.
They were to the right of the site plan.
Oh, okay.
And so you just need to zoom out just a little bit. I believe in the application we wrote that the roofing is going to be the hand seam.
I have a photo of my house has on the 3rd floor is a slate roof, and second floor and the porches that come to the second floor are metal. So I just sent a photo of that roof. It'll be the exact same roof, exact same material, exact same color. The posts for those that carport.
Oh, can you please come up to the microphone?
Please.
Thank you. It's all right.
Well,
I may
you
have
have-
to say that all again because we couldn't.
Okay, so the my house is 3 stories, and the 3rd story is a shingle roof, and the 2nd stories and the porches that come up to the 2nd stories are all metal roofs. So it'll be the exact same material, exact same color, and then the posts for this unattached carport will be mimicking the posts that are on the porch and all around the house in the same trim color, which is ultra white by Ben Moore. And I sent photos of both of them
just
If
now.
you need them, I mean, what we did was match the pitch of the lower roof, which is a hand seam
Yeah.
metal. And that's what we're proposing as a hit on here to keep it as low as possible. And it's so high, it'll appear like those ones, just very.
It'll mimic this roof right there to the left. See that? Right there is a, right there.
Yeah.
So it will mimic that bottom roof right there.
All right.
So,
Right there.
yeah, there. So it'll basically just have a white door, not an eave or anything at all. So from the street, all you'll see, and it's pretty far back, but it's just the white door with the white columns that match the porch, and then the roof is, it's basic.
Good
I
deal.
want to be very indescript and nonchalant, and in keeping with the house, it's a very clean line, 4-square house, and very simple.
Perfect.
That's it.
All right. And before I forget, we've got one member of the public left. Any public comment?
I'm just curious why it's not attached to the house, since you're gonna have to get out and use the gateway every time it's raining. That's one question I have. I can see that architecturally it's better to stand alone and not try to do what's there, which would be very complicated. My only concern, we live next door, and I'm just afraid that things are gonna blow off and sail through the neighborhood.
All right.
Can you please go to the microphone, and were you sworn in?
Not yet.
Oh,
I hope that,
sorry. Missed one.
All right. Do you swear to tell the truth as best you know?
I do, I certainly
All right.
do.
And can you please sign,
I will.
or not sign, but
So, you know, the one guy who's participating in the meeting tonight more than I am, and I didn't have him sworn in, and I don't have his name.
John Falk, where I
Hey,
live
Mr.
next
Jones.
door, actually, on Johnson Street. And we're delighted to see this house. It's so improved since the cats have moved in. We have seen probably 3 owners. The garage at the back actually was run into by, a 1948 Buick, which knocked out the back wall when the Cotters lived there. You can still see where the bricks were put back in. I have no objection to the carport. I think it's, if they want to stop the rain on the cars, it's fine with me. But I am concerned about it blowing away. And we've seen what 100-mile-an-hour winds can do in New Bern. So that would be one concern that the architect might want to address.
Yeah, well, I think Sarah's got the answer to that.
Okay, good.
I mean, we're gonna provide a framing plan for it, and it will be strapped and have a permit and tied to the foundation as is required by code. So,
And it will be professionally done. It's not going to be my husband and I out there slapping it up. So we're going to have a reputable company come out and put it up for us, whether it be Tar Heel or local, will come up and put it up. As
So does
far
that
as,
help?
As far as that goes, anything can blow over, but it
Yeah,
will
okay.
be substantial as far as the construction of it, not just visibly. It will be just more nonchalant. So it won't be a
well, I mean, it has to be built per code, and code requires, bolts down to the foundation and strapping on all the
Yeah.
rafters, so, it should not blow away.
yeah, it's going to be put in to stay. So it'll be very sturdy.
That make you feel a little bit better, Mr. John?
Elevated decks, in fact, there's one in the back of my house, and the thing that bothers me is no bracing on this. Don't know, I'm sure the modern construction can account for that. How it really is, that was put the height of bracing on the post of the roof.
I mean, I think that we can accomplish that with bracing in the ceiling structure itself without
Yeah, and it'll be, the posts will be down in the concrete. That is a concrete pad, and those posts will not be in the ground. They will actually be concreted in the existing concrete pad.
Usually the bracing on the side is required when you're over 1 story, or you're carrying a story above, if that's a foundation for a house. But for this single structure,
Single story.
So for now, I'm going to kind of let it go at that because that's really beyond our purview, and it's about maybe 8:30, and this is the last item on the agenda. So what other questions might our commissioners have?
I just need clarification, please, about your roof for your carport.
Yes,
You have mentioned that your house has 2 styles of roofing.
Yes, ma'am.
What roofing will be on your?
It'll be the exact roofing that is the metal. So if you see in this photo, the very top 3rd floor is a slate roof, which would be
That's
quite
right.
heavy. So we were not doing that. We're doing a metal roof that is, which is still,
hand seamed metal.
yes. I sent a photo so you can see the color and the.
That's all I need to know. I just want to know that you're going to have this standing seam
Yes, ma'am. It's
metal
identical
roof. That's
to
all I
what's on
needed
my
to know.
So commissioners, I think that
Same
is
colors and everything.
guideline 4.5.4 that I've worn out tonight. It is. Okay, any other commissioners? Any other questions from the commissioners for our applicants?
That was my question.
Okay, perfect. So we're in pretty good shape. We're good with our materials. I think our neighbor's happy. He's gone home. Can we have a motion?
No, staff,
Do we have a
staff
staff?
recommendation.
Oh, I did it again. I'm sorry.
At least you're consistent.
I know, I'm consistently wrong. I was on a roll there for a while. I missed the first one. I don't know if you even noticed. I mean, blew right on through that one without the staff recommendation, then caught myself for about the next 8 applications. And I've fallen off the wagon completely.
Go ahead. Matt.
Okay, so it's 202, oh, wow.
Johnson, Johnson.
202 Johnson Street to include construction of a new carport over an existing driveway in the secondary AVC. Staff submits the following historic district guidelines as appropriate to this application. Accessory structures, 2.6.1, 2.6.2. Statements of reason based on the information contained in the application and staff's judgment are: 1, the project is located in the secondary AVC. 2, the design adheres to the aforementioned guidelines. And 3, the proposed project is not incongruous with the guidelines. Staff recommends the Commission approve this application for major exterior alterations at this time, citing the aforementioned guidelines.
Thank you.
I have a side job as one of those commercial
Oh, yeah, you're well trained now.
pharmaceuticals.
So I'll accept either a question, a comment, or a motion.
A motion.
Well, let's have it.
I move that we find the application for 202 Johnson Street to be a contributing factor. It will be including instruction of a new carport over an existing driveway in the secondary AVC. The guidelines are accessory structures 2.6.1, 2.6.2, roof 4.5.4, and finding of fact, projects are located in a secondary AVC. The design adheres to the aforementioned guidelines. The proposed project is not incongruous with the guidelines.
Okay, we've got a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And we have a motion to issue a certificate of appropriateness.
So, second.
Got a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, Ms. Tabitha, you're on your way.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your cooperation, and most importantly, thank you for hanging out, on a Wednesday night, because apparently, like us, you have nothing else better to do.
Now we can all go out and have a drink.
What? Yes. All right. Let's see.
Never deal with kids no more.
Mr. Matt, last couple items on our agenda. Do you want to give us a quick update on administrative items and minor works?
So, 514 Broad Street, been having discussions with a contractor to do some HVAC mini split lines. And the issue was that these lines can be, are generally covered with bright white plastic things that stick on the sides of houses. So that didn't seem to be a very good idea to me. And there may be ways to work around or work with the people to do that. So in this particular case, I did go out to the site with them and looked at the situation, and we were able to get the lines to go behind some things until it got to the second floor, which is where he wanted it at the ceiling of the second floor. And in that case, basically run that cover next to a doorway up there, and I asked him to run that cover all the way to the soffit, not just stop short of the soffit, and then do a blank one on the left side of the door to make it look almost like little pilasters on both sides of the door. So I'll forward you all a copy of that illustration that I did for him to confirm our conversation, our agreement on that. He's also going to be sending in an application for a minor COA on that. But I wanted you guys to be aware that we're working with that issue, and that was one actually pretty easy one,
Right.
Because we had things to hide behind. But there are a number of other things we can talk about at the design review meeting. Some other
I would
issues.
assume those mini splits are just like mushrooms, you know?
Yeah, I think you're going to get a lot of those.
So-
I know I want some in my house. So.
Right.
214 Pollock Street. That was a project that has been an eyesore for many years, apparently. The Tyvek down there across, next to the B&Bs down there, next to the, down just up from the Wiener House and stuff, so a tourist area. And they now suddenly started to do the renovations again, and people were concerned that they weren't doing it correctly, so they called and I checked, and they are indeed doing wood siding, like the lap siding, and they seem to be doing things appropriately, correctly, and it's mostly in-kind repairs. They took all the windows out, but they're repairing them. I'm going to put them back in.
Good.
So things like that. So that's a good story. We've also had 3 tree removals and 3 more inquiries about tree removals. Jeff has said that we have never had more than 5 tree removals in a whole year, and now we've had 6 in a month. So we're getting flooded with these currently. Pardon the bad reference there, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have any other demolition by neglect updates at the moment, and there are no general public here.
So,
All right.
well done. Keep up the good work. Commissioners have any questions for staff? Well, let's have them.
I did want to mention, we did talk about the removal of Trent Court from the district last at the design review meeting. We will be bringing that up for your next general or regular meeting next month for official action. In the meantime, we're also working with the State Historic Preservation Office to work out what needs to be done for or by or with them also. But this is a process that will start with you, go to the planning and zoning, because this becomes a zoning map change, and eventually end up with the alderman. So
I do have a question. You had mentioned that we were going to be talking about the issue of elevating.
yes,
Yeah.
we'll do that at the design review. And just to reiterate, that's 1 week from tonight.
And Trent Court has those wonderful little
Yes,
panels.
that's correct. That's correct. Yep. So yeah,
That's,
we're hoping that those will get saved and become part of maybe something. Either
They're
something on the
fabulous.
site there or some art installation or something.
Matt, I hate to go all ooey gooey, but I so appreciate you.
Yeah.
Peggy and I have been on HPC since March. Is that correct, Peggy?
Yep.
You're our 3rd staff person since March. You are amazing.
Oh, well, thank you, I appreciate that. I don't feel like it's quite, I'm not quite in stride yet, but as you can see tonight, just trying this whole thing out with the whole
You're on your way.
application. I don't know if you guys appreciated that or not, but I felt like that was a quick way to get the information presented rather than letting applicants drone on about some things that may be not relevant.
Very good.
But in some cases, maybe I droned on a little more than they would have, so,
No, not at all.
okay.
Well, feel free to experiment at will.
Okay.
If you're willing to do it, we're willing
Sure.
to work with
Oh,
you.
yeah.
So,
Now, you were all able to get the Dropbox?
I just I couldn't pull staff. I like to have staff recommendations before I
Yeah.
come, but I seen some of them were with some of the applications. And I
Right,
didn't know that.
right. So I kind of got messed up halfway through. I realized I should have maybe put them into the app, have each project stand alone with the recommendations in it as one file. But I had already done some where it was not in, and so I had to add them as a second file. And yeah. So I think someone mentioned that like Peggy likes to get all the recommendations in one file, just recommendations. So that's another way of doing it, and that maybe makes it easier for people to breeze through and see kind of what's up with each one. So I'll probably do all of the above, basically, a separate one for each project. This big one, which was nice to be able to just keep going through, and I hope that was easier for you to follow along. Now, do you all have laptops or tablets or something that you use here?
most everybody does but me
Yeah. So,
and Miss Peggy.
because I know if I had a laptop or tablet, I would be here trying to, oh, wait, you know, where's 203? Oh, it's after 202, so, but instead this way it's just keep going, scrolling through. So,
I'm just
but as we saw, the big pictures tend to screw things up compared to the small ones. Maybe I can squash them down somehow and then they'll all be the same.
But it'll work out. I'm just keeping you honest with what goes up there, which I guess is on TV, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
And obviously it's what the public sees and the applicant sees.
And then
I don't think we are.
No, we're still on.
So,
yeah, we probably are, but because we
but
haven't.
that's okay.
But that said, I am concerned that I'm not sure that we actually are on video. Because we are a week later, and I don't know what it takes to make sure that they video it.
But I saw you taking some really good notes.
I took lots of notes. I bet when I'm away, I better take lots of good notes.
But, all right. Well, thank you again for your efforts.
Thank you.
Move to adjourn.
Yes.
Okay.
Second.
We got a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, sir. Hey,